37 years ago, a young businessman named Fabian Morelli left his office in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and vanished into the frigid winter, leaving behind an abandoned Volvo on the roadside and a shattered family in despair. Authorities suspected his wife, Monica Morelli, the sole beneficiary of a $400,000 life insurance policy, of being involved in the disappearance, but with no body, no murder weapon, and too few clues to pursue. The investigation eventually stalled, the file shelved under cold case, lying dormant in a metal archive for nearly 3 decades. However, a determined female investigator from the cold case unit never gave up, believing that something had been overlooked in that old stack of files. And then one day, while reviewing the ancient evidence, she discovered a small bloodstain on the victim's gray wool coat, a detail that would change the entire case and send shockwaves through the entire state of Massachusetts. Before diving into this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from. And if you love true crime cases, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes. In the winter of 1988, Massachusetts was blanketed in thick layers of snow, the air cold and hard as metal. The yellow streetlights in Newton casting light onto the wet sidewalks, reflecting in quiet pools of brightness. Boston at that time was thriving in a new industrial rhythm, but the suburbs still maintained a slower pace of life, where middle-class Italian and Irish families built 2-story wooden homes, with roaring fireplaces and old Volvos parked neatly in front driveways. The radio played pop music interspersed with news bulletins about financial crises and approaching blizzards. Everything seemed to be running on the familiar track of a northeast winter. Fabian Morelli, 42 years old, marketing director for a cosmetics company based in Cambridge, was the kind of man who was punctual, well-dressed, drove the same route every morning, and returned home before dinner. In Newton Highlands, his wife, Monica Morelli, 39 years old, spent most of her time keeping house, raising their 2 teenage daughters, and maintaining a lifestyle that was neat to the point of being almost textbook. That day, Fabian left the office in the late afternoon, carrying his brown leather briefcase and a promise to be home for dinner. Snow began to fall as he exited the parking lot, the first flakes settling on the car's windshield, the highway wet with headlight glare. When the clock in the Morelli home struck 8, Monica began to worry. The drive from Cambridge to Newton took less than 40 minutes, but Fabian didn't show up, didn't call, and didn't answer. She called his office, then his colleagues one by one, and everyone said he had left early. Outside, the snow thickened, wind whistling through the oak trees in front of the porch, and Highland Street was eerily quiet. Monica paced the living room, checking the phone, glancing at the wall clock, then standing motionless for a long time by the window, where the streetlights blurred behind the snowfall. A growing unease swelled in her chest, a thick silence settling over the house. By the time the clock hands neared 9:30, she picked up the phone and dialed the Newton police duty line, her voice hoarse from cold and worry, reporting that her husband, Fabian Morelli, was missing. At the other end of the line, the Newton Police Dispatch Center received the call, amid the heavy snowstorm, the phone signal crackling with the wind howling along the wires. Officer Nancy Rourke, who manned the regional switchboard, turned on her desk lamp and quickly jotted down the basic details in the duty log: name, age, address, occupation, marital status, physical description, vehicle type, and last known direction of travel, as recalled by the wife. She spoke briefly to the woman on the line, her voice steady and professional. "Please hold, I'll transfer you to the patrol unit." When she hung up, Rourke pulled a brown paper file from the cabinet, labeled it with the temporary case number 88-142, then typed the initial details on the typewriter. Missing person, Newton Highlands, subject Fabian Morelli. Male, 42 years old, U.S. citizen, left Cambridge office this afternoon, did not return home. Under the description section she added, 5'10" tall, black hair, gray wool coat, driving silver Volvo, 240. License plate 3JH492. In the dispatch room, the fluorescent lights cast a dim glow, the typewriters clacking mingling with the radio broadcasting weather updates. Heavy snow, northwest winds at force 6. Temperature -7 degrees Celsius. Rourke signed the report, stamped it red with missing person, initial report, then carried the file to the night shift sergeant's desk, Harold Kinsley. He quickly read the details and ordered patrol units 7 and 9 to begin searching along the Cambridge-Newton route. Start at Chestnut Street Bridge, through Boylston to Hammond Pond, he instructed. His voice low and even. 2 young officers, David Healy and Thomas Carroll, received the assignment, donned their cold weather jackets, grabbed handheld radios, and left the station into the blinding snowstorm. The red and blue lights of the patrol cars swept across the icy road, reflecting off the houses with closed shutters. In the dispatch room, Rourke turned on the radio to monitor the internal channel, listening to the first report. Heading westbound, visibility 15 meters, no abandoned vehicles detected. She logged each detail in the journal, marking the exact time. Meanwhile, Rourke called Cambridge police to verify if Fabian had left the office area. The response came quickly. Morelli's vehicle was seen leaving the lot at 5 p.m. No reported issues. The note was clipped to file #88142, with a handwritten addition in the margin. Left Cambridge, did not reach Newton. By 10:45 p.m., the patrol unit reported over the radio that they were nearing the Hammond Pond area. The snow was falling heavily, the wind whipping so fiercely that the external speaker emitted a metallic screech mixed with voices. Kinsley instructed them to continue another 2 miles before turning back. In the office, Rourke completed the final steps of the protocol, calling the wife back to confirm the situation, asking about her husband's habits, whether he met anyone outside work hours, any recent medical conditions, or personal stress. Monica answered curtly, her voice dry and slow. No, he never came home late, never has. Rourke noted, no history of leaving home, no psychological issues, wife states fear of foul play. On the line, the woman's voice grew weaker, with a long pause before she ended the call with an almost whispered sentence. I just want to know where he is. When the call ended, the report was folded, clipped with the preliminary patrol report, and placed on the command desk. Outside the window, snow still blanketed the steps. In the dispatch room, the wall clock neared midnight. Sergeant Kinsley returned after checking the area map, circled the region between Route 9 and Hammond Road with a red pen, then said curtly to Rourke, keep in touch with the units. If nothing turns up, we'll expand the search at first light. She nodded, pulled the file closer, and looked at the freshly typed line on the first page. 2134, missing person report, received. Investigation in progress. At 42 Highland Avenue, the lights were still on, and in the Newton Police night duty log, a small file numbered 88-142 was officially added to the list. Just before 2 a.m., the Newton Police internal radio crackled with static, followed by Officer Healy's voice, broken by the wind. Dispatch, this is Unit 7. Found an unattended vehicle on Route 9 near the Hammond Pond turnoff. In the dispatch room, Nancy Rourke immediately looked up, jotting it down in the duty log and notifying Sergeant Kinsley. He moved to the dispatch desk and ordered the other units to pause their search and directed Patrol Unit 9 to provide backup. The red and blue flashing lights of the 2 patrol cars pierced the thick snow, illuminating the narrow, deserted stretch of road. Upon arrival, Kinsley saw the silver Volvo parked askew on the shoulder, its front end pointing toward the woods, the front tires lightly touching a hard snowbank. A thin layer of snow had already accumulated on the hood and windshield, indicating the car had been there for at least an hour. The doors were locked, with no signs of forced entry, no broken glass, and no long skid marks on the road. The license plate matched the file, 3JH492. He signaled Healy to approach the driver's side, shining a flashlight through the window. Inside the cabin, the driver's seat was lowered, a gray wool coat draped over the passenger seat. The steering wheel tilted to the right, and the dashboard still faintly glowing from the speedometer. No personal items, no briefcase, no signs of a struggle. Healy tried the door handle. It was locked from the inside. Kinsley radioed back to dispatch, confirmed Volvo belonging to Fabian Morelli, located approximately 1.8 miles east of Hammond Pond, no occupant in vehicle. Scene secure, requesting technical unit for support. While awaiting a response, he and Carroll marked the tire positions with reflective stakes, measured the distance to the road edge, and sketched a preliminary diagram in the scene log. Rourke, back at the office, typed up the initial discovery report, adding the line, "Vehicle located at 2:13 a.m., Route 9 eastbound." Kinsley circled the car, his flashlight sweeping over the snow-covered surface, spotting a small dent just behind the left rear tire, possibly from a footstep or a heavy object dropping. He crouched to inspect it. The ice was frozen solid, the mark unidentifiable. The plunging temperature turned his breath into thin vapor. He stood up, sweeping the light around the area. Everything remained eerily silent, with only the sound of wind rustling through the roadside trees. Inside the car, the interior light was dimly lit, reflecting off the frosted windows. Kinsley checked his watch. It was nearly 4 o'clock a.m. He knew the scene needed to be preserved before dawn, when traffic would increase. He radioed dispatch, his voice hoarse from the cold. "Secure this area. Send the technical team at first light." As dawn broke, the snow stopped falling and the wind shifted, revealing Route 9 more clearly against the gray-white backdrop. The Newton Police Forensics team arrived with a specialized tow truck, approaching the scene cautiously. Fabian Morelli's silver Volvo remained in place as it had been hours earlier, the perimeter sealed with police tape. The first rays of sunlight glinted off the car's hood, reflecting through muddy footprints and faint headlight marks. Sergeant Harold Kinsley handed over the scene to the forensics team, presenting the preliminary report with a hand-drawn diagram. The technicians, dressed in gray coveralls and gloves, set up 35mm cameras to document a full series of overview photos before any intervention. The lead technician, Robert Fraser, logged, "Scene examination began at 7:20. Temperature -4 degrees Celsius, weather light fog, good visibility." They checked a 10-meter perimeter around the vehicle, measuring 68 inches from the left rear tire to the road edge. No skid marks or mechanical damage. Fraser opened the fuel cap, detecting a strong gasoline smell, and the fuel gauge showed over half a tank, indicating the engine was shut off intentionally, not due to running out of gas. After the overview photos, the team began examining the driver's compartment. The door was unlocked, using a spare key obtained by Kinsley from the office, with no signs of tampering. Inside, the driver's seat was lowered and slid back about 4 inches, an adjustment inconsistent with Fabian's height listed in the file. On the passenger seat was a neatly folded gray wool coat, the cuffs damp with moisture, and beneath it, a faded gas receipt dated February 3rd from a Cambridge service station. The ignition key was intact, left in the ashtray, not bent. Fraser noted, "Key in ashtray, unusual position." The rearview mirror was adjusted to the right, and the dashboard clock showed 6:12 p.m., with the battery still weakly operational. The storage compartments were checked one by one, glove box empty, no personal documents, no maps. Under the passenger floor mat, they found 2 coins and a Cambridge parking ticket, time-stamped 4:45 p.m. The technicians used tweezers to collect each small item, placing them in numbered evidence bags, 01My03. The steering wheel surface was smooth, with no clear fingerprints, only faint smudges from condensation. Sunlight slanted through the windows, illuminating the gray upholstery and revealing tiny dust particles floating in the air. They used ultraviolet lights to check for blood or bodily fluids, negative results. The floor was dry, no foreign mud or sand, only a thin layer of snow melted into water around the pedals. Outside, Kinsley observed and added the scene's geographic coordinates from a military map for the file. Carroll photographed the tire positions and vehicle orientation, measuring a 12 degrees tilt to the right of the road. Frazier checked the trunk, empty, containing only an old blanket and a luggage strap. No signs of heavy objects, no fresh scratches. He used a vibration gauge on the door handles, confirming no significant impact to the metal. The preliminary report noted, no signs of forced entry, no clear evidence. Another technician measured the leather seat temperature, determining the car had cooled completely, estimating it had been abandoned at least 3 to 4 hours before discovery. Frazier signed the time section on-site examination completed, 8:35. Once all documentation was finished, the team resealed the doors, strung up caution tape around the perimeter, and allowed the tow truck to approach. Before moving the vehicle, they placed a plastic tarp under the undercarriage to preserve tire marks during towing. The tow truck lowered its hook, lifted the Volvo's front wheels off the road, secured them with chains, and began a slow tow toward the Newton police station. Frazier followed, carrying the case file and 3 small evidence bags, each numbered and witnessed. Kinsley did a final sweep of the area to ensure nothing was missed on the road, then removed the caution tape. On the final Route 9 scene report, typed on site, the summary read, "No visible blood, no signs of violence. All doors intact, vehicle secured for detailed forensic examination." As the convoy left the road, the pale morning light filtered through the trees, reflecting off the thin ice still clinging to the car's windows. The Volvo was towed slowly toward central Newton, its rear wheels leaving 2 long tracks in the old snow, concluding the first examination of Fabian Morelli's disappearance in silence, and with no explanations. When the Volvo was towed away from the scene, Sergeant Harold Kinsley returned to the Newton station and immediately ordered an expanded search for the victim around the Hammond Pond area where the car was found. A topographic map was spread across the command table, with red circles marking radii of half a mile, 1 mile, and 2 miles from the vehicle's location. The search teams were divided into 4 groups. 1 combed along Boylston Road, 1 followed the lakeshore line, a 3rd ventured deep into the western pine forest, and the final group covered the highway shoulder. The early morning weather remained bitterly cold, with snow crunching underfoot, and Hammond Pond's surface covered in over 4 inches of ice, shrouded in thick white fog. The search force included 12 Newton officers, 4 state troopers, and 2 trained cadaver dogs. As the sun rose higher, a Massachusetts State Police helicopter was deployed, scanning the low hills and walking trails around the lake. On the ground, the search teams moved in lines, spaced about 10 feet apart, each member equipped with flashlights, probing rods, and radios. The radio crackled continuously as they communicated over the internal channel. At the lake's eastern shore, Officer Healy's team marked searched areas with stakes. They noted a few indentations in the old snow, but no distinct shapes, possibly distorted footprints from melting ice. A cadaver dog named Ranger signaled a stop near low bushes, barking a few times before moving on. Beneath the snow were only broken branches and old fabric scraps carried by the wind from an unknown source. The northern group continued expanding along the walking trails, frequented by locals' walking dogs. Fresh footprints were marked, but verified as belonging to previously mobilized civilian rescue teams. At the lakefront, state police technicians lowered probes through the ice, measuring thickness and depth, finding no sinkholes or breaks that could be relevant. The helicopter's rotor noise echoed from a distance, its blades kicking up thin snow from the treetops, creating white dust clouds across the forest. From above, the pilot reported via radio. No unusual signs, no foreign objects on the ice. Kinsley stood at the staging area, watching the helicopter circle over the lake before departing, the sunlight glaring off the frozen water. He logged the end time of the first flight and directed the ground teams to continue sweeping trails leading to residential areas. On a small path, parallel to Route 9, Carroll's group found a dark cloth glove half buried in the snow, caked with wet dirt. The evidence was retrieved with steel tweezers, placed in a sealed bag, and assigned a temporary number, though ownership was undetermined. After a few more hours, the search expanded 500 meters south of Hammond Pond, crossing a marshy area with a drainage system. The water in the culverts was frozen, but there were no signs of struggle or falls around it. By noon, the temperature rose slightly, the slowly melting snow turning into cold mud underfoot, making movement difficult. The cadaver dogs were exhausted, their breath coming in thick clouds. At the mobile command post, Rourke radioed from the station that a comprehensive search report was needed by 3 p.m. Kinsley agreed, ordering all teams to conclude the first search phase at 2:30 p.m. By early afternoon, all units regrouped near the Hammond Pond Reservation entrance. The map was spread on a car hood, searched areas marked in red pen. No body was found, no valuable evidence, no unusual movement signs in the snow, except for the search team's footprints. Kinsley's summary report, read before sending to headquarters, stated, "Search completed within 2-mile radius of vehicle location. Negative results, no victim or signs of violence located." On the return trip, snow began falling lightly again, and the ice on the lake cracked softly. In the distance, the red and blue lights of patrol cars still flashed through the white mist, reflecting off the bare pine forest. The entire operation disbanded by late afternoon, leaving only rows of small wooden stakes along the trails, the only remnants of a silent, fruitless search, where only the wind rustling through branches and the gray, cold dusk settling over Hammond Pond in the winter of 1988 remained. That same afternoon, when the search team concluded their first sweep around Hammond Pond without any results, Sergeant Harold Kinsley returned to the Newton headquarters to interrogate the person who reported the missing person. Monica Morelli was invited to the second-floor interrogation room, a small room with a metal table, 2 facing chairs, and a ceiling light casting a pale golden glow. Outside, snow was still falling sparsely, and the wind whipped long, blurry streaks across the window panes. She arrived on time, wearing a dark wool coat and black gloves, her hair neatly pinned up behind, her face pale but showing no clear emotion. Kinsley opened file hash 88142 in front of him, placed the tape recorder on the table, briefly explained the procedure, and asked her to recount the entire sequence of events from the previous morning. Monica responded slowly, her voice steady and unruffled. She said that Fabian left the house around 7:30 a.m., as usual, wearing a white shirt, a gray wool overcoat, carrying a brown leather briefcase, and driving his Volvo 240 to the Cambridge office. They had no arguments. He had breakfast, read the newspaper, and gave her a light kiss on the cheek before leaving. When Kinsley asked when she last contacted her husband, Monica replied that Fabian called home around 5:15 p.m. to say he was leaving the office and might be 10 minutes late due to bad weather. Kinsley noted the time, cross-referencing it with statements from colleagues at the office that Fabian left the parking lot at exactly 5 p.m. He asked again, "Are you certain about the time of the call?" Monica looked up, her eyes narrowing slightly, and replied, "Around that time, maybe a little earlier." Kinsley showed no reaction, just nodded and marked a red question mark in the margin of the file. He continued asking about Fabian's habits, what time he usually got home, whether he stopped anywhere along the way, whether he had friends or acquaintances living along the Cambridge-Newton route. Monica said her husband always drove straight home, rarely stopped anywhere, and had never been late. When asked about his mood in recent days, she replied curtly, "Normal. He was just a bit tired from work." Throughout the interrogation, she rarely looked directly at Kinsley, her eyes often resting on the middle of the table or the tape recorder. Her hands remained folded in her lap, barely moving, occasionally adjusting her collar as if to ward off the cold. After nearly 20 minutes, Kinsley shifted the tone of his questions, delving into details about the evening Fabian didn't return. She said that around 7 p.m., she began to worry, called the office, and was told he had already left. At 9:20 p.m., she tried calling his best friend's house in Watertown, but no one answered, and then called the police. When Kinsley asked why she didn't call sooner, Monica replied, "I thought he might be stuck in traffic or stopped at a gas station. He was always careful." Her voice didn't change, each word clear with calculated pauses between sentences. Kinsley recorded every detail, then asked about the next morning, whether anyone had contacted her, or if Fabian had mentioned any business trips or sudden plans. Monica shook her head, saying no, and added that her husband never went away without telling her beforehand. Kinsley observed her demeanor and saw no signs of the panic or confusion typically seen in relatives of victims. Her face was nearly expressionless, her voice steady, only softening slightly when mentioning their 2 children, before quickly returning to her previous state. He asked further about the wool overcoat and leather briefcase Fabian had taken, and she confirmed it was the gray wool coat he usually wore to work, and the old brown briefcase he'd used for years. When asked if she noticed anything missing from the car, she was silent for a few seconds, before replying that she hadn't seen the scene herself. Kinsley closed the file, turned off the tape recorder, and quickly read back the statement for her confirmation. Monica signed it with a blue ink pen, her handwriting slanted, and even without trembling. Before leaving the room, she turned back and asked quietly, "Have you found anything yet?" Kinsley only said, "We're still conducting the search." As she stepped into the hallway, the fluorescent lights cast a long shadow on the tiled floor. He stood still watching her go, then opened the file and added a final line to the internal record. Statement provided in full, no strong emotional displays. Time frame 17 o'clock, 17:15, inconsistent with office data. Assessment, unusually calm demeanor. Note, need to re-verify time of departure from office. Then he closed the file, folded the report in half, and placed it on the growing stack of files on the cold metal table under the dim light of a Newton winter afternoon. The next morning, Sergeant Harold Kinsley left Newton headquarters, bringing Monica's statement and the vehicle examination report, and drove straight to the offices of Vellum Cosmetics in the Cambridge industrial area where Fabian Morelli worked. The 5-story glass building on Massachusetts Avenue was still lit up when he arrived, with employees coming and going sparsely in the frigid Monday morning. Kinsley showed his police badge at the reception desk and requested to meet the HR manager and colleagues who worked with the victim that day. The young receptionist checked the list and said that Fabian left the building around 5 p.m. on the day he disappeared. After sending a few final documents to accounting, he was escorted to the 3rd floor, where Fabian's personal office was, a small room with a tidy desk, walls displaying company plaques alongside family photos. Kinsley opened his notebook and questioned colleagues near Fabian's desk, including a man named Raymond Cole, about that afternoon. Cole said Fabian arrived for work as usual, had a quick morning meeting, ate lunch with the group, and showed no signs of fatigue or stress all afternoon. He was cheerful, even joked a bit about wanting to leave early because snow was coming. According to Cole, around exactly 5 p.m., Fabian packed up his files, took his leather briefcase and gray wool overcoat, said goodbye to everyone, and left the office. He had no other meetings and didn't mention meeting anyone after work. Kinsley requested to see the internal phone log, and the IT staff provided a detailed record of calls that day. The last entry was at 4:52 p.m., a 2-minute call from Fabian's phone to an external number noted as Boston Athletic Club. He paused at that detail and requested verification of the phone number. The switchboard operator confirmed it was the sports club Fabian frequented 2 or 3 times a week. Aside from that call, there were no further communications after 5 p.m. Kinsley copied down all the data, signed for confirmation, and asked further about Fabian's mood or unusual behavior in the days prior. A female colleague, named Anna Lee, who worked in the marketing department, recalled that Fabian worked diligently, had no conflicts, and showed no signs of pressure. He was always polite. That day he even helped me organize some files before leaving, she said. A ground floor security guard confirmed seeing Fabian leave the building at exactly 5:03 p.m., according to the guard's clock. He walked through the lobby, wearing a gray overcoat and carrying a brown briefcase, heading quickly toward the parking lot. No one was with him, and he greeted the receptionist as usual. The building's security camera data at that time didn't have an automatic recording system, only live monitoring screens, no footage saved. Kinsley asked further about work habits, And Cole said Fabian always left early on Fridays, rarely brought work home, and had no debts or internal conflicts. His personnel file, provided to the police, showed married, 2 daughters, no disciplinary violations, no unusual notes. When asked about close friends in the company, Cole mentioned a few names, including a colleague who used to play sports with Fabian at the Boston club where he made the call before disappearing. Kinsley noted the club's address and hours of operation, and also photographed the phone log sheet for evidence. After more than an hour, he gathered sufficient information, thanked the manager, and returned to the Newton office. On the way back, he opened his notebook and underlined 2 lines in red pen. Left office 17 o'clock. Last call 16:52 Boston Athletic Club. He viewed these 2 details as key time markers to cross-check with the wife's statement. Back in Newton, Kinsley reported to Officer Rourke for filing. Adding a summary assessment note, company employees confirmed Fabian acted normal, no signs of stress, no sudden plans, left workplace on time, whereabouts after 17 o'clock undetermined. He closed the notebook, glanced out the window where snow was starting to fall heavily again, the icy streets reflecting cold white light, and in his mind, the 2 time markers he'd just noted stood out clearly, like a small gap in the final hours of Fabian Morelli's life that no one yet had an explanation for. That same afternoon, after completing verification at the Vellum office, Sergeant Harold Kinsley brought a copy of the internal phone log to Boston to work directly with the management of the Boston Athletic Club, where Fabian Morelli made his last call before leaving the office. The club was located on Berkeley Street, a 3-story red brick building with fogged glass doors and a dimly gleaming metal sign in the winter dusk. Kinsley presented his police badge, explained the purpose of the investigation, and was invited to the manager's office on the 2nd floor. The shift manager, a middle-aged man named Alan Price, confirmed that Fabian had been a registered member since 1986, playing racquetball 2 sessions a week, usually after work. According to the membership records, Fabian had a standing court reservation at 5:30 p.m. every Monday and Wednesday, typically arriving on time, changing quickly, playing a match with the club's coach, and leaving before 7 p.m. Price opened the court booking ledger for February 4th, and the entry was clear. Court 3 Morelli, Baker, 1730. He explained that Coach Robert Baker handled the racquetball group, and Fabian was a longtime student of his. Kinsley requested to speak with Baker for a statement. The front desk staff said Baker was coaching an afternoon session and could arrive in about an hour. While waiting, Kinsley reviewed the membership file. Fabian paid dues regularly, no outstanding debts, home address matching Newton Highlands, phone number consistent with police data. The club's phone log recorded a brief call at 4:54 p.m. from the Vellum office, matching the Cambridge record exactly. At 3:40 p.m., Robert Baker arrived, tall with tanned skin, short blonde hair, wearing a club logo tracksuit. When informed of the meeting's purpose, he was cooperative, sat at the table, set down a water bottle, and clasped his hands in front of him. Kinsley opened his notebook and began with basic questions. "Did you meet Fabian Morelli yesterday?" Baker nodded and said Fabian called around 10 minutes to 5, saying he wouldn't make it due to work matters, and he simply replied, "No problem, see you next time." Kinsley asked about their relationship, and Baker said they'd known each other for over 2 years, close in sports, but didn't socialize outside the club. He was a nice guy, always punctual, really passionate about racquetball, Baker said, his voice steady and unhesitating. Kinsley recorded every word, observing the man's demeanor, calm, not evasive, but slightly tired, with a small band-aid on the skin around his left ring finger. When asked about the injury, Baker said curtly, "Scratched it during this morning's practice, hit the wall." Kinsley made no comment, just noted it. Baker added that when Fabian called, he was in the ground floor coaching office with a few other students, and this could be verified with management. When Kinsley asked if Fabian had shown any unusual behavior recently, Baker replied no. He seemed healthy, talked about his 2 daughters, mentioned he might take a break from playing due to work. The interview lasted over half an hour, with Baker maintaining a natural tone, occasionally offering a polite smile. Kinsley requested to see the afternoon shift staff list to verify the statement. Manager Price confirmed Baker was present from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m., not leaving the club per the time log. As he left the office, Kinsley paused at the front desk, looked at the court booking board again, and underlined Morelli. Baker, 1730 in red pencil in his notebook. He thanked management, collected copies of the membership history and call logs, and left the building as night fell. Outside, snow fell lightly, streetlights reflecting golden hues on the wet pavement. He stopped at the front steps, opened his notebook, and wrote briefly, "Fabian called, 1652. Baker received call, confirmed canceled session. Minor injury on left hand. Club staff confirm afternoon presence." A strong gust made the paper flutter. Kinsley closed the notebook, walked quickly to his car, and added to the end of the page, "Robert Baker, racquetball coach. Last known contact before Fabian's disappearance." As he drove away from Berkeley Street, city lights reflected in the rearview mirror, blending with the red lights of his police car, and in the missing person file hash, 88142. The name Robert Baker was officially added to the list of persons of interest to monitor. The next morning, Sergeant Harold Kinsley sent a summary report of the Boston Athletic Club meeting to the command office, while requesting permission for a formal interview with Robert Baker to complete the statement. The meeting was scheduled at Newton Police Station at 10 a.m. in the small interrogation room with a steel table, 2 facing chairs, and a tape recorder placed in the center. Baker arrived on time, wearing a gray tracksuit jacket, maintaining his calm and somewhat confident demeanor. He extended a hand in greeting with a faint smile, then sat down, interlocking his hands across his chest. Kinsley opened the file, turned on the tape recorder, introduced the interrogation procedure, and confirmed this was a voluntary interview, with the interviewee free to leave at any time. Baker nodded, looking directly ahead. He began with a basic question, "Did you meet Fabian Morelli on the afternoon of February 4th? Baker replied immediately, his voice firm. "Yes, but only for a few minutes. He stopped by here before heading home." He explained that Fabian arrived at the club around 5 p.m., stopped by the coaching office to inform him he wouldn't play the scheduled racquetball match, saying he had to get home early because snow was coming. Then he left immediately, without changing or entering the court. Kinsley asked for precise timing details, and Baker affirmed, definitely before 5:15 p.m. He noted it, then shifted to the earlier call from the Cambridge office, where Baker said Fabian called to say he'd arrive earlier than usual, sounding normal, with no signs of stress. Kinsley asked him to describe Fabian's clothing and mental state exactly. Baker said he was wearing a gray wool overcoat, carrying a brown leather briefcase, looked a bit tired but still smiled, like always. Kinsley looked down at the table, opened a document folder, and placed a photo of Fabian taken at the company in front of him. Baker confirmed it was the man he met that afternoon. When asked about their personal relationship, Baker said they were close in sports, had competed in a few internal tournaments together, but rarely met outside the club. He emphasized that he was just an hourly coach and didn't know much about Fabian's personal life. Throughout the interview, Kinsley noted Baker's voice was even, concise, with little expression. He observed Baker's left hand, where a white band-aid was applied. When asked, Baker said briefly, "I scratched it yesterday during morning practice, hit the wall." He extended his hand, showing a small wound on the second knuckle, not deep, with dried blood. Kinsley requested a detailed note, and the technician behind him took a photo for the file. Baker didn't object, just gave an awkward smile and asked if he needed to go to the hospital. "No, just for the record," Kinsley replied. Next, he asked about Baker's departure time from the club that evening. Baker said, after Fabian left, he coached 2 other students, then locked up around 8 p.m. Manager Alan Price and front desk staff could confirm. When Kinsley asked if Fabian mentioned going anywhere afterward, Baker replied, "No, he just said he had to get home early because of slippery roads." Kinsley recorded every detail without interrupting. He shifted to questions about work, checking for any conflicts or arguments between them, and Baker shook his head. "None at all. He was the best student I ever coached." They were silent for a few seconds, with only the sound of the pen on paper. Kinsley's final question, "Did you leave the club area that evening?" Baker said, "No. I stayed the whole time, and people can verify it." The interview ended at 11:45 a.m. Kinsley turned off the tape recorder and read back a brief summary for confirmation. Baker signed the bottom of the page, his signature large, slanted, and hurried. As he stood to leave, Kinsley said, "If we need more information, will you cooperate?" Baker replied lightly, "Of course, I have nothing to hide." After he left the room, Kinsley stayed to add an internal assessment to the record. Person of interest cooperative statement matches club data, no evasive behavior, minor injury on left hand, specific cause unconfirmed, no evidence of wrongdoing, insufficient grounds for detention. He folded the file, attached the photo, and placed it on Rourke's desk for the case file. On the final page, he underlined in red pen, "Robert Baker, seen with victim 17 o'clock, cooperative release." In the hallway outside, the sound of police boots echoed softly on the tile floor, and the tape recorder was still warm when Kinsley closed its lid, marking the end of the first formal interview with the last known person to have met Fabian Morelli before his disappearance. 2 days after the interview with Robert Baker, when the review from Boston Athletic Club yielded no further information, Sergeant Harold Kinsley received orders from command to expand the search for victim Fabian Morelli to a 5-mile radius around Route 9. Based on the topographic map provided by the Department of Transportation, this area included Hammond Woods, the Newton Upper Falls residential area, part of the highway, and secondary roads leading to the town's outskirts. Early morning, the search team was mobilized with 14 Newton officers, 6 state troopers, and 2 local rescue units. A temporary field command center was set up in the parking lot near the Hammond Pond entrance, where Fabian's Volvo had been found. Strong winds rattled the tarpaulin, and snow had hardened into gray ice. At 8 a.m., Kinsley received the deployment order and divided the team into 3 directions, Group 1 sweeping along Boylston Street westward, Group 2 covering residential areas adjacent to the woods, Group 3 coordinating with state units to check drainage channels and secondary roads leading to Route 128. The teams were equipped with metal detectors, high-powered floodlights, radios, and detailed maps. A state helicopter was requested to take off at 9 a.m. for aerial photography support. In the northern sector, Officer Healy led a team along an old trail to an abandoned parking lot. They found a few fresh indentations in the snow, but measurements showed only animal tracks. Half a mile away, Carroll's group checked along a metal fence separating the residential area, finding no clothing, items, or signs of a struggle. Over the radio, Kinsley instructed teams to report coordinates and status every 30 minutes. By late morning, there were no suspicious reports aside from a few trash items half buried in the snow. He ordered Phase 2, canvassing witnesses and passers-by. Newton officers were assigned to go door to door along Route 9, knocking to ask residents about the night of the incident. Most responses were similar. Heavy snow, no one was out. A man living on the second floor of an apartment overlooking the road said he saw headlights around 6 p.m. Maybe a patrol car or civilian vehicle, but couldn't recall the color or license plate. This report was noted but lacked verification value. Kinsley also contacted the only gas station along the route, McCormick Station, to see if anyone remembered Fabian Morelli stopping for fuel that day. The afternoon shift attendant said he served a guy driving a light-colored Volvo around 4:30 p.m., but wasn't sure it was Fabian. The receipt found in the car matched February 3rd, but the station code was faded and unreadable. When pressed further, the attendant just shook his head. "I see dozens of people a day, can't remember them all." The witness report was sent with Fabian's identification photo, but no one confirmed seeing him after 5 p.m. In the afternoon, the search team continued sweeping the small pond west of Hammond Pond, where the water was frozen over a handspan thick. They used iron rods to probe suspicious spots, finding no depressions or submerged objects. The helicopter made its final pass at 3:45 p.m., reporting via radio. No disturbed areas detected, no signs of a second vehicle. At the command post, Kinsley reviewed the aerial photos, mostly just white snow interspersed with dark tree shadows and faint road traces. He signed the log, search radius extended to 5 miles, no results. At 5 p.m., the stand-down order was issued. Teams packed up equipment, compiled reports, and returned gear to storage. On the master map, searched areas were marked with dense red pen strokes. One officer suggested rechecking the Southern Woods access road, but it was already dark with near-zero visibility. Kinsley ordered a pause, scheduling a follow-up meeting for the next morning. He stood in front of the patrol car, looking through the dark line of trees where snow still fell lightly like dust. In the summary report, sent back to Newton, the final line was typed, "Extended search and witness canvass completed. No trace of victim, investigation continued." As he closed the case file, the sound of the last helicopter faded into the thick gray sky, leaving the ground silent and blanketed in white, as if every trace of Fabian Morelli had been completely swallowed by a Massachusetts winter. 3 days after the expanded search around Route 9 ended, without discovering any significant traces, a patrol team responsible for the area west of Hammond Pond was ordered to recheck the strip of forest bordering the old trail, where previously heavy snow cover had limited the inspection. On the morning of February 9th, temperatures rose slightly, melting the snow into patchy thin layers of ice, exposing patches of damp soil. Sergeant Harold Kinsley personally led a 4-man team consisting of Healy, Carroll, and 2 Massachusetts state forensic technicians. They moved in a line, spaced about 10 feet apart, advancing more than 500 meters southwest of the lake. The sky was overcast, cold wind blowing back from the water surface, carrying heavy moisture. Near 8 o'clock, as the team passed a low-lying area near the base of an old oak tree, Officer Healy spotted a dark object protruding amid the dry leaves and mud. He signaled to stop, crouched down, brushed away the layer of ice-covered branches, revealing a piece of gray wool fabric mixed with mud and melted snow. They cautiously lifted the edge of the fabric and realized it was a men's business-style overcoat, with brass buttons, notched lapels, and a slight tear in the seam of the right sleeve. Kinsley approached, examined the thick layer of mud clinging to the lower part of the coat, then ordered the technicians to photograph the scene before moving the evidence. They set up temporary barricades, marked the location with reflector stakes, and the serial number 01 on plastic cards. After taking overall and close-up photos, the technician used tweezers to lift the edge of the coat, flipping over each section of fabric. Inside the left pocket was a white handkerchief folded in half, wet and stained with dark mud. When unfolded, they noticed a dried reddish-brown stain spread across the center. Fraser, the forensic technician, leaned in close and quietly said, "Signs of blood, needs immediate testing." He used a small scalpel to cut a corner of the fabric, placed it in a specialized plastic bag, and labeled it E4788, cloth sample. The remaining portion was folded and placed in another sealed bag, marked garment. Recovered Hammond Pond. Kinsley stood silently for a few seconds, looking at the soil around the area, then directed a search within a 10-meter radius for additional related items. Carroll found a coat button fallen near a tree root, matching the type of the remaining buttons on the coat. All items were carefully collected, photographed, and numbered in order of discovery. Strong wind caused the covering tarp to flutter, with thin snow starting to fall sporadically again. Kinsley ordered no movement around the area and requested precise coordinates marked on the map, W42°19, Nen 71°12, Hammond Pond West Trail. After collection was complete, the team returned to the field station. In the temporary lab, Frazier performed the Kastle-Meyer reaction on the handkerchief sample, positive for human blood. He noted in the record, specimen E4788, human blood, partial dry oxidation. The sample was then sent to the Lowell lab for blood type determination. 2 days later, the preliminary report from Lowell returned to Newton Police, blood type O+, matching Fabian Morelli's medical records on file in personnel records. The report stated, blood sample consistent with victim's known type. When the results reached Kinsley's desk, he read each line slowly, a chill running down his spine despite the heated room. He marked in red ink in the margin, first physical evidence linking victim, recovered 09 February 1988. At the same time, he ordered photographs of the evidence in storage in Newton's sealed vault. The overcoat was air-dried naturally, placed on a metal rack, tagged with number E4788, noting date and time recovered, location, collector and examiner. The blood-stained handkerchief was sealed separately in an isolation bag, accompanied by a soil sample collected from the discovery site for comparison. The official report was completed that day, with the conclusion stating, recovered male overcoat, gray wool, identified style, consistent with garment described by spouse Monica Morelli, cloth sample with human blood. O+, consistent with victim profile. No additional trace or fibers observed. In the evidence room, Kinsley personally signed the final verification, stamping property of Newton Police Department, evidence hold. He looked at the clear nylon bag containing the evidence, where the gray wool fabric, mixed with dried brown mud, lay quietly yet heavily. Outside, dusk fell early, the faint light of the winter afternoon filtering through the headquarters window, casting long streaks of light on the wall. In the investigation log, a new entry was added under evidence summary, E4788, gray overcoat, recovered Hammond Pond Trail, contains blood type O+. Kinsley set down his pen, closed the file folder, and for the first time in many days, clearly felt that the disappearance of Fabian Morelli had left a truly existing trace amid the cold snow of Massachusetts. Immediately after evidence, E4788 was sealed and transferred to Newton storage. Sergeant Harold Kinsley sent a formal examination request to the Massachusetts State Forensics Lab in Lowell. On February 11, 1988, the blood-stained handkerchief and fabric samples were handed over to the biology lab under Dr. Arlen Becker. The initial report confirmed blood type O+, matching victim Fabian Morelli's profile, but Becker recommended additional trace analysis to determine possible blood mixture contamination. The sample was split into 2 portions, the first for Kastle-Meyer and Takayama chemical reactions, the remainder preserved in a -18-degree freezer. In the brightly lit white lab, the technician in gloves used a pipette to draw solution from the still moist bloodstain, diluted it, and dropped it onto a glass slide. Under the microscope, the blood cells were deformed, indicating oxidation from days prior. However, when using a special reaction solution to identify serum protein types, they observed 2 different reactions on the same slide. One was O+, as previously determined, but alongside it was a faint reaction streak for blood type B, inconsistent with Fabian's profile. Becker ordered the experiment repeated on another sample portion to rule out error. The second result was similar: primary blood O+, secondary B, appearing on the outer edge of the handkerchief in the area with heavy soil contact. The internal report noted, secondary blood trace detected, inconsistent with primary sample. Becker immediately called Sergeant Kinsley to report, explaining that it was likely contamination from another person during contact, but identity couldn't be determined since DNA profiling technology wasn't available in Massachusetts at the time. He clarified, "We can only determine blood type, not match identity. The second sample needs cold preservation for future testing." Kinsley noted the results and requested all samples be stored in the state's frozen vault. In his handwritten report to Newton, Becker detailed the process, using 3 milliliters phosphate buffer solution, negative reaction with animal plasma, confirming 100% human blood. He concluded, primary human blood, type O+, consistent with victim profile. Secondary trace type B, unknown origin. No contamination detected during lab procedure. At Newton Police, Kinsley read every line carefully, then marked in red ink in the margin, second blood, unidentified source. The notation was highlighted as a key point in the report sent to the State Investigation Office. The B sample was transferred to a glass test tube, labeled Lowell Forensic Storage Hash 12B, and placed in the long-term freezer with the original evidence. Without DNA separation technology, analysis was limited to chemical serological methods. Technicians recorded storage time and conditions, stable, -18 degrees, 30% humidity. Accompanying it was a semi-annual tracking form to ensure no degradation. Meanwhile, Becker ordered microscopic photos of the 2 distinct reaction areas, printed them, and sent hard copies to Newton for inclusion in File 88-142. The images clearly showed the O+ area dominating the center of the handkerchief, while the B area was coin-sized, offset at the lower edge, darker brown. The complete report, 8 pages thick, was stamped, Forensic Report Number 118L, 88. State Laboratory Lowell, February 12, 1988. A second copy was sent to the Middlesex County Prosecutor's Office. The original retained at Newton. Kinsley signed for receipt at 5:10 p.m., rereading the final conclusion, due to current technological limitations, DNA profiling, unavailable. Recommend preservation for potential future analysis. He folded the documents, placed them in the main file folder, and set it on the desk, next to a photo of the gray overcoat. In the quiet room, the wall clock ticked steadily, pale light filtering through the fogged window. He looked at the lettering on the file cover, E4788. Then slowly added a note in blue ink, second blood trace discovered, origin unconfirmed, preserved frozen. The case paused there, with a rare but crucial piece of evidence stored cold in the Lowell Forensics Vault, where glass tubes bearing case number 88-142 lay silently amid the metallic chill, awaiting future technology to complete the story the present couldn't answer. The examination report from the Lowell Forensics Lab reached Newton Police 3 days after completion, but instead of opening new leads, the results only complicated the Fabian Morelli case file further. Sergeant Harold Kinsley held an emergency meeting with the field, forensics, and patrol teams to compile all data after 2 weeks of investigation. A Route 9 map was spread across the table, dotted with red marks, indicating searched areas, from the parking lot, trails around Hammond Pond, to the residential area near Newton Upper Falls. Witness reports were blank. No one saw Fabian after 5 p.m. on the day of the incident. No collisions recorded. No traffic cameras since the area wasn't equipped. No emergency calls. No vehicle signals. The Volvo scene showed no signs of struggle, no blood, no foreign fibers. The only evidence, the gray overcoat and blood-stained handkerchief, confirmed the victim was injured, but insufficient to determine extent or cause. Kinsley presented 3 main hypotheses before submitting the report to superiors: accident, abduction, or murder. The accident hypothesis was eliminated first since the car was found intact, not fallen off a slope or skidded. The abduction hypothesis lacked basis due to no witnesses and no ransom demands. Murder, though most likely, had no crime scene, weapon, or physical evidence to prove it. The Newton Police internal report of February 18 clearly stated, no witnesses, no sign of struggle, no trace of forced entry, no visible motive. Kinsley looked at the densely written summary board, feeling the gaps in the file larger than ever. He reviewed Monica Morelli's statement again, noting the timeline between 5 o'clock and 5:15 p.m. still didn't match Fabian's colleague's account, but no evidence to accuse. Robert Baker, the last to see the victim, had verification from the club manager of staying until 8 p.m. His minor hand injury wasn't enough for suspicion. Missing person bulletins aired on local stations but yielded no new information. On the 17th day since Fabian's disappearance, Newton police officially ended the active investigation phase. The summary report spanned 42 pages, filled with uniform lines, timelines, locations, personnel, evidence, search results. Each investigative lead ended with the repeated phrase, "No further leads." Kinsley signed under the conclusion, based on current findings, the case is classified as missing person, no evidence of foul play at this stage. He transferred the entire file to the Middlesex County Sheriff's Office for storage and review upon new data. At Newton headquarters, scene photos, the snow-covered Volvo, the mud-stained gray coat, were neatly filed in plastic sleeves, numbered per evidence catalog. In the evidence room, technician Fraser returned the E4788 box to the shelf, sealed with silver tape, adding a label, "Long-term storage." The filing system remained fully manual, reports typewritten, red-inked stamps, double-folded, and stored in metal cabinets. In the summary sent to the state office, Kinsley added a few personal remarks. Investigation exhausted all available leads. Environmental conditions limited search efficiency. No indications of voluntary disappearance. Those cold words closed 2 weeks of tension without answers. That evening, as he left the duty room, looking out the window toward Hammond Pond freezing under streetlights, Kinsley saw only absolute silence, the silence of a disappearance without witnesses, evidence, or answers. The next morning, File 8842 was moved to storage under Missing Person Matters, no leads, shelved with hundreds of other cases awaiting review, marked by a white slip with the brief note, Fabian Morelli. Last seen February 4, 1988. Status: unresolved. By the end of 1988, with all information sources exhausted and no new leads emerging, Newton police officially suspended investigation activities on the Fabian Morelli disappearance. On December 29, Sergeant Harold Kinsley completed the final report, stating, "No witnesses, no additional evidence, no definitive signs of crime, file retained under missing person no leads category." The report was numbered 124 in the year's case catalog. He signed, stamped, and handed it to the Middlesex County Sheriff's Office for transfer to the Massachusetts State Archives per routine procedure. Evidence: E4788, the gray overcoat and blood-stained handkerchief, was packed in a standard aluminum box, sealed with silver tape, and labeled Evidence Retention, 1988. The secondary B blood sample was separately sealed in a glass test tube, stored in the Lowell Forensics deep freezer with other comparison samples. All original documents were microfilmed, the data reels stored at the State Administrative Archives Center in Framingham. In his personal notebook, Kinsley wrote briefly, "February to December, no results. Situation undetermined." He affixed a blue file cover to the main documents, handwriting, #88142, Morelli, Fabian, status, pending review. In the Newton office, a 2-drawer metal cabinet was opened, containing dozens of case files neatly aligned, from thefts to long-term disappearances. The Morelli file was placed in the bottom drawer, position 27, between Anderson, 87908, and Jeffries, 88165. Kinsley stood looking for a few seconds before locking the cabinet, turning the key twice, the metallic click echoing in the empty room. In the hallway outside, dim yellow light cast on the old tile floor, reflecting through the thin dust on Fabian's temporary photo pinned to the case's pending bulletin board. Rourke, the female officer who took the first missing person report on the night shift, passed by and paused to ask quietly, "So it's really over?" Kinsley nodded slightly, replying curtly, "Until there's reason to reopen." He cleared his desk, stowed his notebook, and folded his coat. On the desk, an uncapped blue fountain pen lay next to an ink-still-wet evidence inventory form. Finally, he turned off the light, leaving only the faint hallway glow. That night, heavy snow fell across Newton, blanketing the Hammond Pond entrance and the road section where the Volvo was found. In the Massachusetts State Archives, hundreds of numbered metal boxes stacked to the ceiling, each containing unsolved case evidence. In row B, shelf 4, the box labeled E4788 sat neatly between 1987 and 1989 files, with a red label "Hold indefinitely." Inside, the gray wool fabric was dry, the handkerchief neatly folded in a nylon bag, and the blood test report clipped inside the lid. Everything was preserved to standard, cold and silent. On December 31st, Newton Police's final comprehensive list was sent to the state office. Line 19 in the status column, handwritten by the chief clerk, case hash 88142. Fabian Morelli. Missing person, no leads. Investigation suspended. At the right corner, a round red stamp over filed, the ink slightly smudged from humidity. That marked a temporary end to an 11-month unresolved disappearance, as early years snow fell again on the same old roads, and the name Fabian Morelli from then on existed only in the Massachusetts State Archives catalog, sleeping quietly in the cold metal shadows of the bleak winter of 1988. After the Fabian Morelli disappearance was officially classified as investigation suspended, the entire file, evidence, and scene photos were transferred to the Massachusetts State Central Archives, located in a small industrial area in Framingham, about 30 miles from Newton. On January 5, 1989, Newton Police's transport vehicle delivered the file boxes to the State Archives office under sealed catalog, receipted via a 3-page form. The metal box containing evidence E4788, original file 88-142, and microfilm copy was placed in shelf B14, 4th row from the entrance, in the cold storage, unresolved section. The storage space was cold and dry, with dim white neon lighting, rows of shelves aligned straight, each compartment taller than a person, meticulously numbered by year and case type. Archive staff affixed the label, "Property of Newton Police Department, do not remove without authorization." Inside the box, the gray overcoat was neatly folded, the handkerchief in a separate nylon bag, the blood type test report clipped inside a plastic sleeve. In the adjacent compartment, the glass test tube with the secondary B blood sample lay in a stainless steel tray from the Lowell Forensics Lab, stored in a -20-degree freezer. All were hand-recorded in the inventory log, date received May 1, 1989, received from Newton PD, status cold storage. From then, the Morelli file gradually faded from memory. Months passed, personnel changed, new cases opened, while old files were only checked annually to ensure temperature and humidity standards. The storage system remained fully manual, no barcodes or electronic databases. Custodians rotated signing the log, noting no movement for years on end. In the 1990s, the archives expanded with 2 new sections, but shelf B14 remained unchanged. Outside, a thin layer of dust gradually coated the box surface, paper labels faded, leaving only the blue ink. Morelli, Fabian, missing person, 1988, blurred by time. Occasionally, new staff during quarterly inventories would pause to read the catalog, skimming this name among hundreds others, unsolved disappearances, people swallowed by time. In 1995, the storage system was renovated, automatic climate control installed, and old file boxes temporarily moved to an auxiliary vault for reorganization. In that year's inventory record, the handwritten note by the manager, B14 Morelli case. Box intact, seal unbroken, no activity since 1989. From that point, the file was no longer mentioned in annual meetings. Quarterly evidence checklists were stamped, no change. In another cabinet, the microfilm reel of the file copy was stored in a black plastic case, label faded 88-142. Missing person, Newton. Outside, the initial frost began to brittle and yellow with age. Everything remained in original condition, per state storage protocol. No movement, no breaking seals, no review without prosecutor's order. Years passed, no one remembered Sergeant Harold Kinsley, who once directly led the case, his personnel file also archived after retirement in 1997. Each year, late January, archive staff walked the shelves, cross-checking the inventory log, scribbling in blank fields, condition unchanged. The room always cool and quiet, only the steady hum of the freezer compressor. Amid hundreds of unsolved cases, thefts, assaults, disappearances, the metal box labeled E4788 lay still, its red hold, indefinitely label, intact. Only slightly yellowed at the edges. Over a decade passed, untouched, no reason to break the seal, no new entries in the log. The Fabian Morelli disappearance became one of Newton's forgotten names, an old file lying dormant amid a long line of sealed memories in the cold metal shadows of the Massachusetts State Archives. By 2003, when Massachusetts launched a statewide review program for suspicious unsolved cases, the Cold Case Unit under the state police was established and headquartered in Worcester. The new unit's mission was to re-examine pre-1990 unsolved cases, especially those with stored biological evidence suitable for the widely adopted DNA technology in other states. In the first review wave, the Framingham archives were fully inspected. On August 14, 2003, a young investigator team led by Lieutenant Ellen Fiske opened the Middlesex County Missing Person No Leads file catalog. Among hundreds of names, a faded blue-gray file cover bore the time-worn handwritten text, #88142, Morelli, Fabian, Newton. Fiske checked the inventory log, noting the last receipt in 1989, with no activity since. She requested the E4788 evidence box for condition check. Archive staff unlocked cabinet B14, pulled the dusty old metal box from the shelf, its seal intact, only faded at the corners. Inside, the gray overcoat remained wrapped, the blood-stained handkerchief in its separate nylon bag, accompanied by the O+ blood type report and Lowell Forensics notes on the secondary B sample. Fiske recorded in the log, condition intact, seal unbroken, suitable for reanalysis. She ordered evidence photos, added a new cold case unit tape and designation for DNA testing when applicable technology available. That was standard procedure to flag files with potential future biological analysis. The original file was temporarily transferred to Worcester for backup, while evidence returned to Framingham after inventory. In the cold case unit office, Ellen Fiske reread all 1988 Newton reports, search logs, interviews, forensics results, timelines, all still typewritten in mechanical font, ink faded. She recognized the Morelli case had two rare elements, human blood-stained evidence and an unidentified secondary sample. In 1988, the state forensics lab lacked DNA separation equipment, stopping at blood type classification. By 2003, this technology was becoming widespread, though resources limited, prioritizing homicides with witnesses. Fiske noted in her report, specimen E4788 contains mixed human blood, recommended for future DNA profiling upon resource availability. After completing the review, the Morelli file was classified Priority Review Level 2, meaning re-examination when the State Forensics Lab acquired STR equipment or National CODIS linkage. She signed, dated, and sent copies back to Framingham, adding a red note, "Do not destroy, biological evidence present." When procedures ended, the E4788 box was returned to shelf B14, with a new paper taped outside, DNA hold. Fluorescent lights reflected off the scratched metal surface, handwritten text amid layers of old and new tapes, forming the silent history of a case forgotten for 15 years. In the year-end summary report, the cold case unit stated, total reviewed 238 cases, eligible for DNA testing 47, recommended priority cases 12, including Newton missing person #88142. Signed at the bottom was Lieutenant Fiske's signature. With the final note, no immediate action, evidence preserved. As file boxes were returned to Framingham, E4788 resumed its original position, but now bore an additional white label, marking its scene for the first time in 15 years. In the dry cold air of the archives, Cartwheels rumbled softly on concrete, metal doors closed, lights dimmed, leaving only the small text DNA hold, reflecting the last faint hallway light, signaling that the Morelli case, though still unresolved, had officially entered the queue for future DNA technology redemption in Massachusetts. By early 2015, after more than a decade since the first cold case review, the state of Massachusetts launched a statewide DNA analysis program using STR technology, allowing the extraction and matching of genetic sequences from old stored biological samples. When the list of eligible cases was published, including 47 cases from the 1980s, the name Fabian Morelli appeared at position 28, designated E4788, mixed blood sample. On March 22, 2015, the Framingham storage facility received an order to transfer the evidence to the state's forensic laboratory in Lowell for re-examination. Forensic technician Ann Calder was responsible for opening the seal on box E4788 under the supervision of Lieutenant Ellen Fiske, who had participated in the 2003 review and now served as the project coordinator. When the sealing tape was cut, inside remained intact the gray coat, a neatly folded handkerchief, and an old blood test slip. Calder used tweezers to extract the dried blood-stained fabric, separating two sample areas as instructed in 1988, the light brown central area and the darker edge area. She noted the new codes, E4788 and E4788. Each sample was cut into pencil-tip-sized pieces and dropped into centrifuge tubes containing modern DNA extraction solution. The STR analysis machine was activated, automatically displaying the sequence codes on the screen. 16 molecular loci were separated and read over 8 consecutive hours. By evening, sample E4788, confirmed a single genetic sequence matching the male DNA profile, consistent with Fabian Morelli's medical records and reference samples stored since 1986 in the Vellum Company file. The result matched exactly 100%. However, for sample E4788, the system displayed two intertwined sequences, one matching the victim, the other a second male DNA profile with a completely different structure. Calder ran a comparison in the CODIS database, the national system containing criminal records, with biological profiles from 1993 onward. The computer took nearly 30 minutes to process and finally displayed a brief message on the screen: match found, State Offender Registry, Baker, Robert L., Massachusetts Correctional Entry, 1993. Ellen Fiske stood behind her, staring at the text without a word. The complete match report showed 15/16 STR markers, matching exactly with the DNA sample from Robert Baker's 1993 criminal record, the racquetball coach who had been questioned in the Morelli case and released nearly 30 years earlier. Fiske requested a full printout of the results, signed off on the cross-check verification, and initiated a second independent analysis to rule out contamination. Sample E4788B was sent simultaneously to the Central Forensic Laboratory in Boston. 2 weeks later, the confirmation report from Boston arrived: independent verification, full match to Robert Baker. No contamination detected. The 11-page comprehensive report, including electrophoresis graphs and STR sequence codes, was signed by both Calder and Fiske. The conclusion line was typed in bold: secondary blood trace from item E4788 conclusively belongs to Robert L. Baker. Probability of random match 1 in 23 trillion. In the Lowell office, Fiske placed the printout on the table, the white light reflecting off the still warm paper. She exhaled slowly and signed the result confirmed section. Copies of the results were immediately sent to the Middlesex County Prosecutor's Office and the Newton Police Department, where file 88-142 was still stored in the cold case category. Upon receiving the news, the Newton Division Chief, Captain Thomas Riley, called an emergency meeting and immediately reopened the Morelli case. In the evidence transfer log, the final line clearly stated, evidence reanalyzed under 2015 STR program. Secondary DNA identified as Robert L. Baker. Box E4788, was repackaged, affixed with a new orange label, DNA processed. Do not remove. On the final page of the Lowell report, Fiskey's handwritten note added, first confirmed foreign DNA recovered from 1988 case. Connection to living individual established. That same day, the DNA match data was automatically uploaded to the federal system, syncing with Baker's old criminal record, who had been entered into CODIS due to a 1993 sexual assault conviction in Worcester County. With the DNA sequence now confirmed as an exact match, the disappearance of Fabian Morelli, seemingly just a faded file dormant in the Framingham metal storage, suddenly became one of the most prominent cases of the 2015 STR DNA program, opening a turning point that those who first handled the file in 1988, like Harold Kinsley or Nancy Rourke, surely could not have imagined, nearly 30 years later, a small dried blood stain in the pocket of a gray coat would be the first key to reconnecting the entire story. Thought to be closed forever in the cold shadows of Massachusetts. Immediately after the DNA analysis results were confirmed as an exact match with Robert L. Baker's profile, the Middlesex County Prosecutor's Office issued an order to reopen the investigation into Fabian Morelli's disappearance. On April 12, 2015, Detective Ellen Fiske, then lieutenant in charge of the Cold Case Unit, was officially appointed lead investigator. She arrived at Newton Police Headquarters in the morning, carrying the STR report from the Lowell Forensic Lab and a copy of File 88 Modern 142. In the old storage room, metal filing cabinets stood in dusty rows, the thick smell of old paper and metal rising. Fiske unlocked a cabinet, pulling out the yellowed file containing typewritten reports in mechanical font. Sergeant Harold Kinsley's statement, Monica Morelli's testimony, Robert Baker's interview transcript, the Route 9 crime scene diagram, and a series of Polaroid photos of the Volvo and gray coat. The pages crackled as she flipped through them, the edges brittle and yellowed. Fiske laid everything on the table, labeling it Reopened 2015. DNA link established. The first step was to digitize the entire file with a scanner alongside her technical assistants, creating an electronic archive for comparison. Next, Fiske reviewed the old statements, using a red pen to underline notable timelines. 17 o'clock, Fabian left the office. 17:15, call to wife per Monica's testimony. 17:30, appointment at Boston Athletic Club. 20 o'clock, Baker claimed to have finished work. These markers were aligned on a whiteboard, drawn with a steel ruler, forming a timeline spanning less than 3 hours, but representing the case's critical gap. Fiske reread Monica's 1988 statement multiple times, noticing several minor inconsistencies. She said, Fabian called home around 5:15, but the company's internal phone log confirmed his last call at 16:52, to the Boston Athletic Club, not their home. When asked why she misremembered, Monica replied, possibly mixed up the time. In Kinsley's report, he noted, unusually calm demeanor. Fiske paused at that line, circling it, then opened Baker's interview transcript. He claimed Fabian stopped by the club around 5 p.m., looking tired and a bit rushed, but the manager confirmed Baker did not leave the club during that window, and no one else saw Fabian arrive. She noted, Baker and Monica both provided unverified timelines. Next, Fiske requested the Records Department to retrieve old Boston Athletic Club data to check for any prior incidents or suspicious behavior by Baker at the time. The file revealed that in 1993, he was convicted of sexual assault and required to submit a DNA sample, the very data that matched the 2015 STR results. Fiske sat pensively, staring at Baker's 1988 photo in the file. Young face, direct gaze, expressionless. She sensed the quiet connection between the two timelines. The man released for lack of evidence now reappeared in a biological analysis, nearly 30 years later. The next step was reconstructing Fabian's movements that afternoon. With the crime scene technical team, Fiske overlaid digital maps onto the old ones, marking key points: Vellum office, the club, the discovered car location, Hammond Woods area, snowfall, limited visibility, and the points only 6 miles apart, yet complete disappearance. She questioned whether Fabian might have stopped midway to meet someone. In her handwritten report, Fiske noted, potential secondary meeting between 17 o'clock, 17:45. Then, she reviewed the E4788 evidence file, gray wool coat, handkerchief, O+ bloodstain and B stain. They were in close contact, she murmured in her office, adding the note. Physical proximity confirmed by mixed blood trace. The red and black scribbles crisscrossing the whiteboard formed a relationship map. Fabian at the center, one line to Monica, one to Baker. Fiske requested old photos of Monica from the personnel file for comparison. In the archive, the 1988 photo of Mrs. Morelli in the Newton interrogation room remained intact, her gaze direct, expression calm. Fiske placed that photo next to Baker's, pinning them beside Fabian's travel route map. Every detail seemed poised to reconnect. That afternoon, she completed the case reactivation report, sending it to the Middlesex prosecutor's office. Case hash 88142, reopened based on DNA identification. Primary suspect Robert L. Baker. Secondary review required on original testimony of Monica Morelli. Below the conclusion, she added by hand, reconstruction in progress. Timeline conflict unresolved. As she left the room, hallway lights reflected off the whiteboard, where the timelines and names Morelli, Baker, Monica remain bold in the dim light. After 27 years of being forgotten, File 88-142 was finally reopened, and this time, the person in charge was Ellen Fiske, who had once skimmed it as a vague disappearance among cold case files, now facing it directly with the sense that the unanswered questions from 1988 were returning, demanding to be heard to the end. After reopening the file and re-examining the statements, Detective Ellen Fiske shifted focus to analyzing financial motives, a factor often overlooked in old disappearance cases, especially when third-party DNA evidence is involved. She requested the Newton Police Economic Records Department to coordinate with Middlesex County banks to retrieve all of Fabian and Monica Morelli's accounts from before and after his disappearance. Paper bank statements found in old microfilm records were printed and enlarged. The data showed clearly, Fabian maintained a personal account and a joint account with his wife at Newton Savings Bank, with stable balances and no unusual transactions before his disappearance. However, the notable item was in the life insurance policy list on July 12, 1987. Fabian signed a $400,000 policy with Hartford Life Insurance, explicitly naming his wife, Monica Morelli, as the sole beneficiary. In the Vellum Company file, this policy was considered a supplemental condition of his management employment contract, effective immediately upon Fabian's death or disappearance exceeding 12 months. Fiske reread that clause twice, redlining beneficiary, spouse. In the banking section, she discovered a transfer record dated December 20, 1988. Just over a month before the case was officially closed, a $20,000 transaction was made from Monica Morelli's account to an account in the name of R.L. Baker at Worcester Credit Union. This designation made Fiske pause. She requested verification of the identifier, and the state's new system confirmed it was the same Robert L. Baker, whose DNA profile matched sample E4788. In the retrieval log, the transfer purpose was vaguely noted as personal loan. There was no evidence Baker repaid this amount, nor any loan agreement. Fiske circled the transaction line in red, then reopened the 1988 statement. Monica had claimed she only knew Baker through my husband's club, not clothes. The contradiction became clear. She drafted an internal report. Bank record indicates financial connection between Monica Morelli and Robert Baker, preceding case closure. Possible motive, insurance and monetary benefit. Next, Fiske requested the Hartford Archives Department to provide information on the policy status after Fabian's disappearance. The documents revealed that in 1989, Monica filed a claim for advance payment due to unexplained disappearance, but the company rejected it because the case lacked a legal conclusion. She only received a small refund from related savings. While there were no signs of illegality in that action, Combined with the transfer to Baker, Fiske began to see a pattern. Fabian disappeared. Monica remained the legal beneficiary of a large insurance policy, and just weeks after police suspended the investigation, a significant personal sum was transferred to the last person to see the victim. She opened the investigation timeline on her computer, adding 2 new lines. December 20th, 1988, 20,000 USD transfer Monica Baker. July 1987, life insurance, 400,000 USD. As the details aligned, the nearly 30-year gap between them seemed to shrink. Fiske presented the findings to the state prosecutor with the note, "Financial link indicates pre-existing relationship between beneficiary and DNA match." The prosecutor's office requested continued expansion of verifying the personal connection. By reviewing old citizen records, Fiske found Baker's 1986 driver's license listing a Worcester address less than 40 miles from Newton, and old club phone data showed Monica's home number called Baker's number 3 times in January 1988, all before Fabian's disappearance. Though these calls were too brief to trace content, the timing coincided with Fabian's extended business trip in New York. Fiske added a handwritten line to the whiteboard. Personal contact confirmed prior to disappearance. In her final analysis, she concluded, evidence suggests financial and personal connection between Monica Morelli and Robert L. Baker prior to disappearance. Combined with DNA match, financial motive cannot be excluded. The report was numbered CCU 1519, sent with complete bank statements, insurance contracts, and timeline notes. As she left the office, Ellen Fiske paused by the investigation board, looking at the red-inked lines connecting Fabian, Monica, Baker, now with a second parallel arrow, financial link. Outside, May rain fell lightly in Boston, drops pattering evenly on the window glass. In the brightly lit white room, the cold numbers on the bank statements seemed to speak what no one had seen for nearly 30 years, that behind the seemingly meaningless disappearance, there may have existed a bond, both private and calculated, between 2 names that had lain dormant in the files for more than half a lifetime. When the financial analysis results revealed a suspicious connection between Monica Morelli and Robert L. Baker before the disappearance, Detective Ellen Fiske moved to investigate their movement history over the nearly 3 decades that followed. She began with Massachusetts state residency records. Baker left Worcester in early 1989, months after the Morelli file was closed. In that year's tax return, his final contact address was an apartment complex in Springfield, after which no further activity was recorded in the state. Federal system data showed Baker moved to Arizona, then to California around 1991, working as a freelance racquetball coach for clubs in Los Angeles County. 1993 traffic violation records noted a new address in Woodland Hills, matching the residential area north of San Fernando Valley. That same year, Baker was convicted in a sexual assault case, required to submit a DNA sample to corrections authorities. The data that later matched evidence E4788. Fiske noted, left MA within months after closure, established life in CA. Next, she reviewed Monica's residency records. In 1990, Monica Morelli sold the house in Newton Highlands and moved to Santa Monica per USPS address system and Hartford insurance records. In 1992, she registered a small personal image consulting business in Los Angeles, using an office address less than 6 miles from Baker's residence. These facts made Fiske pause. She requested the California State Demographics Department to retrieve voter registration and personal tax records. The results confirmed from 2001 to 2015, Monica Morelli resided in Woodland Hills, the exact area where Robert Baker still lived. The 2 names that appeared together in the 1988 Massachusetts file now coexisted in the same Los Angeles zip code. Fiske wrote in large letters on the investigation board, "Co-location confirmed, LA County." From there, she coordinated with the Los Angeles Police Department and Federal Prosecutor's Office to obtain a temporary surveillance warrant under the Cold Case Interstate Cooperation Program. The warrant allowed legal monitoring of movements, banking activity, and electronic communications to determine if the two still maintained contact. In June 2015, LAPD detectives began installing surveillance equipment around Baker's residence, a ground-floor apartment in a quiet neighborhood near Topanga Canyon Boulevard. Not far away, Monica lived in a two-story rental house on Ventura Boulevard, just a 10-minute drive. The first reports noted by late July, Baker's gray pickup truck frequently stopped in front of Monica's house in the evenings, staying about 2 hours before leaving. A week later, traffic cameras captured Monica and Baker exiting a small restaurant in Woodland Hills together, appearing intimate. Fiske received the report, opened the blurry black-and-white photo print, and placed it beside the 1988 file photos from Newton. The two faces had aged but were still easily recognizable. "Nearly 30 years," she said quietly. Then noted, "confirmed ongoing relationship." From there, police continued silent surveillance. Weekly reports showed they met 2 to 3 times on average, sometimes leaving the city together for a few days. Credit card records also showed multiple joint expenditures at the same locations, restaurants, and hotels around Los Angeles. The accumulating evidence painted a clear picture. The two were not just old acquaintances, but maintained a close relationship spanning decades. Fiske compiled a summary report for the Middlesex prosecutor. Subject: Baker and Monica Morelli, relocated to California in early 1990s. Both currently reside within Los Angeles County, approximately 6 miles apart. Observations confirm consistent contact, suggesting sustained relationship. Possible concealment of prior association during original investigation. With the report, she attached a migration route map for both, a red line stretching from Newton to Worcester, then curving through Arizona, ending in Los Angeles, with 2 markers overlapping at their current residences. The final line she wrote by hand below the diagram: from Massachusetts to California, same path, same silence. It was past midnight in the Worcester office, white lights illuminating thick file stacks, reflections glinting off old photos. Ellen Fiske stood, looking at the expansive map before her, understanding that those travel lines were not just geographical distances of 2 people connected to the 1988 disappearance, but traces spanning 3 decades, linking both ends of a story that, for the first time in nearly 30 years, gave Massachusetts State Police legitimate reason to start over from the beginning. After the surveillance warrant was officially approved in August 2015, the Joint Task Force between Massachusetts Cold Case Unit and LAPD began monitoring the 2 suspects, Robert Baker and Monica Morelli, in Los Angeles County. Under Detective Ellen Fiske's direct supervision, the surveillance team used 2 unmarked civilian vehicles, a video recording technical team, and 2 mobile surveillance specialists. Both subjects maintained discrete routines, but followed stable patterns. Baker coached racquetball in the mornings at a local club, often stopping at a small coffee shop near Topanga Canyon in the afternoons. Monica worked at an image consulting store on Ventura Boulevard, finishing at 17 o'clock. Reports noted in the first week, Baker appeared at Monica's door 3 times, carrying thick envelopes, staying inside about 2 hours. Hidden cameras in the surveillance team's vehicle captured the 2 exchanging small items, sometimes envelopes, sometimes white paper bags. Both avoided looking around, did not hold hands, but their familiar gestures indicated a long-standing relationship. On August 17, Detective K04 followed Baker to a local post office in Woodland Hills. He mailed a large envelope package addressed to him, Morelli, at Monica's residence, but instead of direct delivery, he used the hold for pickup internal service, requiring the recipient to collect it. 2 days later, post office security cameras recorded Monica picking up the package, signing as M. Monroe. Her handwriting was similar to the signature in the 1988 Massachusetts file. Comparison analysis confirmed 14 matching points. Fiske received the report and requested continued monitoring of their communication methods. Over the next 2 weeks, detectives noted multiple instances of the 2 exchanging envelopes by hand or via intermediary mailboxes at a small dry cleaner on Ventura Boulevard. Store staff reported they often saw an older man dropping off mail for a gray-haired woman, paying cash, never appearing together. LAPD installed hidden cameras behind the counter, capturing clear footage on September 3rd. Baker entered, placed a yellow envelope, and left. 2 hours later, Monica arrived to collect it. Fiske requested collection of all evidence, sending it to fingerprint analysis. Results: Baker's prints matched 11 points, Monica's 9 points. In the report to the state prosecutor, Fiske wrote, "Evidence indicates sustained physical contact and deliberate concealment of communication methods." At the same time, the technical team monitoring phone signals detected 2 unregistered mobile numbers frequently active in the same area, often turned on simultaneously. Data showed over 8 weeks, these numbers exchanged 137 text messages and 22 short calls, all deleted after sending. Fiske requested carrier traceback, identifying the phones purchased with cash at a convenience store in Encino without ID. Another detail caught the surveillance team's attention: Baker frequently carried a black gym bag when leaving Monica's house, sometimes with an unusually bulging shape. Cameras recorded him placing the bag in his trunk, then driving directly to a mini storage facility on DeSoto Avenue. Police obtained a temporary search warrant from local prosecutors to check storage rental activity, discovering the unit rented under the alias Richard Boone since 2012, with no sub-agreements. Fiske noted by hand, possible storage site for correspondence or memorabilia. The technical team did not open the unit, awaiting a full warrant from Middlesex. Meanwhile, Monica maintained a normal outward life, but surveillance noted irregularities. Every Thursday, she left home at 22 o'clock, drove to a residential area 2 miles away, parked for 10 minutes, then returned without stopping elsewhere. The behavior repeated for 4 consecutive weeks. The surveillance team discovered she stopped near a small park where Baker often walked in the mornings. Location maps showed multiple overlapping points, differing only in timing. Fiske reviewed the data sequence, exhaled slowly, then said, "They communicate directly but avoid appearing together." By early October, after 6 weeks of surveillance, the cold case unit compiled all video photos and banking documents, submitting a report to the Middlesex prosecutor's office with the conclusion, "Subjects demonstrate continuous association pattern of secret communication, probable collusion." That same day, Fiske proposed escalating the file from surveillance to special investigation, requesting search warrants for Baker's home and storage unit, and opening a temporary file under Code Case Reopen 88142B. She added by hand at the end of the report to the prosecutor, "Observed behavior suggests mutual concealment, exchange of unidentified documents, and consistent financial secrecy." That evening, as the surveillance team withdrew from the Woodland Hills neighborhood, light rain fell in Los Angeles, wind sweeping through palm rows. In the car, Fiske reviewed footage of Baker and Monica sitting side by side in a parked car outside her house, streetlights casting golden reflections through the windshield onto 2 faces aged 30 years. They remained silent, no words spoken, only a brief moment when Baker handed Monica a double-folded envelope, their hands touching then parting. The video ended with Fiske's quiet note in her log. 30 years later, the silence looks exactly the same. On October 14, 2015, after gathering sufficient evidence from surveillance reports, the Middlesex County Prosecutor's Office, in coordination with the LAPD and Massachusetts Cold Case Unit, executed a search warrant at Robert L. Baker's residence in Woodland Hills. At 6 a.m., a 12-member task force approached apartment number 214 on the ground floor of a quiet residential complex with white walls and a small yard planted with decorative palm trees. Baker was ordered to stand on the porch, offered no resistance, and only quietly asked, "What's going on?" The search warrant was clearly read aloud, signed by a Los Angeles County judge, authorizing the seizure of physical evidence, storage devices, and personal documents related to the 1988 disappearance. Ellen Fiske was present on site, directly supervising the search process. In the small, tidy but dusty living room, with outdated furniture, A solid oak cabinet against the wall drew attention. When the technician unlocked it, inside on the top shelf was a small wooden box, dark brown in color. The box had a simple snap lock, unlocked, containing a few personal items, an old photograph, a broken chain necklace fragment, and a men's Longines wristwatch with a brown leather strap, slightly scratched crystal face, and the steel case back engraved with two small initials. Fiske stared at the item for a long time, then ordered the technician to glove up and seal it immediately. The watch face reflected dimly under the light, and the worn metal edges showed years of use. When placed under white light, the technician noticed a dark streak on the edge of the leather strap, resembling dried blood, running along the stitching. The sample was photographed, micro-sectioned, and sealed in a nylon bag, labeled E4715. Next to the watch box, the technicians discovered a large envelope tied with thin twine, containing a stack of handwritten letters on yellowed paper, with some letters marked 1989 in the upper right corner. Most were signed M in slanted handwriting with light blue ink. The first opened letter began, "Rob, I can't write any more from Newton. Everything's too dangerous." The writing was shaky, slanting toward the bottom of the page, but clearly signed M. Morelli. Ellen Fiske signaled to stop, ordering each letter to be photographed in place, and the entire stack sealed in an evidence bag. E4715. The envelopes bore faded old U.S. stamps, featuring Washington and postmarks from Worcester in March 1989, matching the time Baker left Massachusetts. In the drawer below, technicians found two small notebooks containing handwritten notes. "I've moved. They're not looking anymore. Everything's calm now." Fiske stood silently, saying nothing, just flipping through the pages, rereading the shaky handwriting, then ordering the entire contents seized. In the bedroom, inside the bedside cabinet drawer, they discovered an additional faded Polaroid photograph of Monica, around age 40, standing next to a silver Porsche, likely taken in California in the early 2000s. All evidence was removed and placed on a long table, numbered and labeled according to procedure. When Baker was asked to sign the property receipt, he glanced at the list, paused at the line "wristwatch," engraved FM, lips tightening, saying nothing. After signing, he was ordered to leave the area for the forensics unit to conduct fingerprint sweeps. Fiske immediately called Massachusetts to request urgent blood sample analysis on the watch. 3 days later, results from the Lowell Forensics Lab arrived via fax. DNA from trace sample matches victim Fabian Morelli, with probability 99.9998%. Below that line was the confirming signature of Dr. Arlen Becker, who had processed sample E4788 in 1988. The report stated, "Blood trace derived from wristwatch consistent with original O+ profile, no cross-contamination observed." Upon receiving the document, Fiske placed the fax on the table, stared at the bolded 99.998% figure, then slowly wrote at the bottom in red pen, "Recovered item, belongs to victim." Meanwhile, the technical team analyzed the letters further, identifying 12 fingerprints matching Robert Baker's profile and 6 others matching Monica Morelli's from identity records. Another envelope contained a small scrap of paper written in pencil. "No one knows, don't keep anything of his." She read it, folded the paper, placed it in an evidence bag, and signed under the line "Evidence reviewed on site." In the report submitted to the Middlesex prosecutor, the conclusion section read, "Recovered multiple correspondences between Baker and Monica Morelli, dated 1989. Wristwatch, with engraved initials FM containing victim's blood identified. Direct physical linkage between suspect and victim confirmed." Fiske signed, stamped, and placed the file into a large envelope. Outside, Los Angeles sun blazed after the rain, light reflecting off the table onto the now blood-dried watch, as if still holding the time frozen from that Massachusetts winter night in 1988. The final moment of Fabian Morelli, now found not in the snowy woods, but in the small home of the man who had denied any involvement for nearly 30 years. On September 12, 2015, after nearly 4 months of surveillance and 2 weeks since obtaining DNA evidence belonging to Fabian Morelli, the Los Angeles Police Department, in coordination with the FBI and Massachusetts Cold Case Unit, conducted a simultaneous arrest operation for 2 suspects, Robert L. Baker and Monica Morelli. At 6:15 a.m., the LAPD task force surrounded the Woodland Hills neighborhood where Baker resided. The arrest warrants were signed by the federal court at the request of the Middlesex County Prosecutor's Office in Massachusetts, based on physical evidence and DNA analysis results. When police knocked, Baker was in the living room wearing a gray tracksuit and did not resist. He only asked, "What now?" from Massachusetts, before being handcuffed and read his Miranda rights. At the same time, a second team approached the 2-story house on Ventura where Monica lived. She had just stepped out with her purse and was ordered to stop. The commanding officer's voice rang out, "Monica Morelli, you are under arrest by order of the state of Massachusetts on charges of conspiracy and obstruction of justice." Monica stood frozen for a few seconds, then dropped her bag, raised her hands, her eyes vacant. Both were transported to the FBI headquarters in downtown Los Angeles for extradition processing. Local media began reporting on a federal arrest related to the 1988 disappearance case, but the victim's identity was not disclosed. In the temporary interrogation room, Baker remained silent, only stating, "I want a lawyer." Monica, after a few initial minutes of silence, quietly asked, "What did you find?" the only question she uttered. Ellen Fiske was present during the first interrogation, observing through a one-way mirror. She noted Baker maintained a calm demeanor, his face showing no fear, while Monica trembled slightly, clenching her fists. After 48 hours of temporary detention in Los Angeles, the official extradition order was approved. On September 15, the 2 suspects were escorted on a federal flight to Boston under the supervision of 3 FBI agents and 2 cold case unit officers. The handover report clearly stated, "Suspects in custody, transport to Middlesex County Detention Facility." When the plane landed at Logan Airport in Boston, it was drizzling under a gray sky. Both were taken directly to the Middlesex County Jail in Cambridge. Massachusetts media immediately reported widely. Cold Case 1988, reopened. 2 arrested in connection with Fabian Morelli disappearance. Before the media cameras, the state prosecutor, Marjorie Levitt, appeared at a brief afternoon press conference on the same day. She read an official statement, based on physical evidence, DNA analysis results, and seized documents. The Middlesex County Prosecutor's Office has charged Robert L. Baker and Monica Morelli with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and obstruction of justice in the 1988 disappearance of Fabian Morelli. After the statement, she took no questions. In the press room, Ellen Fiske stood in the back, silently watching. It was the moment she had waited for over 12 years since first reading Fabian Morelli's name in the cold case catalog. The next day, the 2 suspects appeared at a preliminary hearing in Middlesex District Court, where formal charges were read. Baker remained silent. His defense attorney declared his client denies all charges. Monica kept her head bowed, saying nothing, her face pale, eyes deep-set. Before the press, her attorney briefly stated, "My client is a victim of circumstance and not involved in any crime." The court denied bail requests, holding both in custody pending trial. Outside the courthouse, local reporters heard the name Fabian Morelli again for the first time. A disappearance case thought buried for nearly 3 decades. In her internal report, Fiske wrote the final line, December 9, 2015, arrest executed. 27 years after disappearance, primary and secondary suspects in custody. She closed the notebook, initialed it, then stood and looked out the window of the prosecutor's office, where afternoon light fell on Cambridge's old buildings. A light drizzle fell on the glass, reflecting the image of the woman who had spent half her life pursuing a truth that had finally returned from the cold metal vault. Across the ocean of Massachusetts memories, everything began to close the circle. The victim, the perpetrator, and the one who once thought the story had ended that winter in 1988. Now meeting again in a courtroom where time stopped to answer the question left hanging for 27 years. After being extradited to Massachusetts and detained at the Middlesex holding facility, Robert L. Baker was separated from Monica Morelli and taken to a high-security interrogation room in Cambridge. On September 17, 2015, the formal interrogation began under the supervision of Detective Ellen Fiske and 2 FBI agents. The interrogation room was cold, with harsh white lighting. 1 tape recorder and 2 wall-mounted cameras recorded everything. For the first 3 hours, Baker maintained a calm demeanor, repeatedly claiming that Fabian Morelli's death, if it occurred, was an accident. He spoke in an even, emotionless tone. "I didn't kill him. It was just a scuffle." Fiske did not interrupt, only placing before him a photo of the Longines watch engraved FM with the bolded DNA result. Baker looked at the photo, blinked slightly, then leaned back quietly for nearly a minute. When Fiske placed the 1989 envelope of letters from Monica in front of him, his expression changed. "She doesn't deserve to be dragged into this," he said softly. Fiske replied, "Then tell us what happened." The recording continued for nearly 9 hours, documenting Baker's gradual shift from denial to detailed confession. He began in a hoarse, slow voice. "Fabian didn't know Monica and I were involved. She said she'd tell him at the right time. But then he got suspicious. I didn't plan to do anything, just wanted to talk." When Fiske pressed for specifics, Baker recounted that on the afternoon of February 4, 1988, he met Fabian near the Route 9 parking lot. He had just left the office, driving his Volvo, and stopped because I signaled him. I said I wanted to explain everything, but he came at me. Baker used his hands to demonstrate the struggle. I pushed him into the car, had something in my hand. I think it was an ashtray or a wrench. I don't remember. I hit him, not hard, but there was more blood than I thought. He paused, sighing. He fell into the seat, his head hit the steering wheel, then he didn't move. Fiske said nothing, just took notes. I panicked, tried to pull him out of the car, was going to call for help, but then thought Monica would get involved. I took his coat, tried to wipe up the blood, then left. When asked why his own blood was on the evidence, Baker replied, "When I pulled him out, my hand slipped on the seat edge and got cut. My blood got on his handkerchief." He looked down, hands trembling slightly. "I didn't mean to kill anyone. I just wanted to end the trouble." Fiske continued, "What did you do with Fabian's body?" After a few seconds of silence, Baker said quietly, "I dragged him to the edge of the woods, west of Hammond Pond. There was an old structure, an abandoned pump station. I left him there, covered him with leaves. I thought someone would find him, but then it snowed, and everything was buried." On the recording, his voice lowered. "I went back a few days later, but snow covered everything. I knew no one would find him." Fiske asked, "Did Monica know?" After a few minutes, he replied, "She knew something happened, but she wasn't there. She was scared, told me to leave the state. I did." When asked about the 1989 letters, Baker nodded. "I kept them because they were the only thing left of her. We thought everything would be fine." The FBI report noted specific times. 1743. Baker began admitting to the assault. 1915. Identified body disposal location, about half a mile west of Hammond Pond, near the old pump station in the research area. Fiske paused writing, asking one final time for confirmation. "Can you be more precise?" Baker closed his eyes, describing the path. "From Route 9, turn onto a small trail, through a row of oaks. There's an old wooden sign. Go about 200 meters, to the right, there's a collapsed concrete foundation. That's where I left him." After the confession ended, he requested water, his voice breaking. The recording ended at 20:02, with Robert L. Baker's confirming signature under the line. "I confirm this statement is voluntary and truthful." Fiske stepped into the hallway, leaned against the wall, and looked at the clock showing 8:30. She had pursued this case for over a decade, and finally, the story was told, not by the victim, but by the one who had denied everything. In the report sent to the state prosecutor the next morning, she summarized, "Subject Baker admits to physical assault, resulting in fatal injury of Fabian Morelli. Confirms disposal site near abandoned pump facility, west of Hammond Pond." Her handwritten final line read, "Location consistent with original search perimeter in February 1988. Unsearched zone due to snow coverage." That same day, the prosecutor's office issued an order to deploy a forensics team to search the area Baker described. The story of 27 years of silence had just turned to a new chapter, and for the first time since the winter of 1988, Massachusetts prepared to enter the woods where Fabian Morelli might still lie, waiting in the cold shadow of earth and stone. On the morning of September 19, 2015, just 2 days after Robert Baker's interrogation, the Massachusetts State Forensics Team was mobilized to the wooded area west of Hammond Pond to excavate based on the directions Baker provided in his confession. The site was deep, nearly half a mile from an old trail leading to a crumbling concrete structure, once an abandoned pump station of the old research system. The area was completely cordoned off, with Newton police erecting barriers and white tarps around a 50-meter perimeter. Detective Ellen Fiske was present from early morning, directly supervising the search. Dawn broke slowly, thick fog hung in the air, and the ground was covered with dry leaves and tangled roots. Beneath the damp brown soil, cracked concrete foundations bore the marks of time, evoking the familiar chill of the land, searched nearly 30 years ago, but missed due to heavy snow. The technical team used metal detectors, ground-penetrating radar, and specialized probes. After over 2 hours, an anomalous signal appeared near the southwest corner of the structure's foundation. When digging down about 70 centimeters, the shovel blade hit something hard. The technician used a small brush to gradually clear the soil, revealing a grayish-brown femur bone connected to the pelvis, still in place. The entire area fell silent. Fiske signaled the team to stop, calling the forensics chief to confirm. Continuing to expand the excavation, they found a slightly fractured skull on the left side, teeth intact, followed by fragments of a gray-green knitted sweater mixed with mud and a small metal bracelet engraved with FM on the inside. When light hit it, the faint engraving became clear through the rust. Fiske stepped forward, gloved up, held the bracelet in her hand, stood silently for a long time, then whispered, "This is him." The entire area was marked, photographed, GPS coordinates recorded, and documented in the report. Recovery Site, 88-142 Sector West. The bones were collected piece by piece and placed in specialized boxes lined with white cloth. Beside the skeleton, they also found scraps of old shoe leather, a metal shirt button, and a piece of rotted, illegible paper. All were sealed and labeled E4715C through E4715H. The scene report noted, "Remains found consistent with adult male, height 5'10", 6'0" UHE, approximately 27 years post-mortem." After completing the excavation, the samples were transferred to the Lowell Forensics Lab for DNA analysis and comparison with the 1988 archived profile. The analysis took nearly 10 days due to severe bone degradation. The expert team extracted DNA from the femur marrow using modern STR technology similar to the prior E4788 sample. On September 29, 2015, the official results were sent to the cold case unit. DNA extracted from bone sample matches the reference profile of Fabian Morelli with probability 99.99999%. The 4-page report bore a red identified stamp. Dr. Arlen Becker, who had analyzed the initial blood sample in 1988, signed the confirmation. In the lab, Ellen Fiske received the facts, stood silently staring at the perfect match probability figure, gripping the paper tightly. 30 years of what was once mere speculation had become undeniable truth. Fabian Morelli had finally been found, not just a name in a missing persons file, but a real person with definitive evidence. Fiske, along with prosecutor Marjorie Levitt, revisited the original scene to verify the location map. She noted in her log, site located 0.42 miles west of original 1988 search perimeter. Not excavated during initial investigation due to snow obstruction. The precise match left everyone speechless. The distance between the old search boundaries and the actual site was only a few dozen meters. A small deviation that had buried the case for nearly 3 decades. That afternoon, evidence containers were transported to Newton for temporary storage, while the remains were sent to the State Identification Institute to complete legal procedures. On the report, Fiske's clear handwriting stated, "Remains recovered and identified, Fabian Morelli, case status changed from missing to homicide." Outside, Massachusetts dusk fell over Hammond Woods, where white tarps still stood, marker stakes planted around the ruined concrete foundation. Wind whispered through the tree gaps, carrying the early autumn chill identical to the February 1988 air when Fabian disappeared. This time, the place was no longer an anonymous void, but a true crime scene. The end of a nearly 30-year journey for answers, where the silence of the earth was finally replaced by the pen's confirming signature. Fabian Morelli had been found. The forensic examination report was completed in early October 2015. After Fabian Morelli's remains were transferred to the Massachusetts State Central Identification Institute for detailed analysis. The forensics team, led by Dr. Arlen Becker, examined each bone fragment, measured structures, and documented injury levels. The 12-page report clearly stated the skull had an 8.4 centimeters crescent-shaped fracture on the left occipital region, with a radiating crack extending to the temporal bone. Adjacent to the fracture was a clear indentation, characteristic of impact from a hard object with an edge, such as a metal bar or mechanical tool. No signs of arm or rib fractures ruled out a vehicle collision. The bone fracture severity indicated a strong impact force from behind and above, consistent with the victim seated in a vehicle when struck. Preliminary conclusion: cause of death was severe traumatic brain injury from a blunt hard object, with death occurring instantly or within minutes. On the sweater recovered from the scene, the forensics lab found a tear along the left shoulder, with deep blood staining on the torn edges, proving the victim was still wearing it during the attack. Mud samples from the sweater hem were separated and compared mineralogically with soil collected from the 1988 Volvo discovery site on Route 9. Geochemical analysis showed near-perfect matches in silicate and clay composition, with a deviation index of 0.02%. The report stated, soil composition consistent with Route 9 roadside sediment, indicating body initially made contact with ground near vehicle site prior to relocation. This meant Fabian Morelli was attacked at or near his vehicle, then moved to the abandoned pump station area where the body was found. Additionally, in the victim's jaw, technicians found a 2 mm glass fragment identified as automotive window glass. This supported the hypothesis that the attack occurred inside the vehicle, with impact against a window or windshield. Microfibers from the lower ribs and sweater fabric were compared to carpet fibers from the sealed 1988 Volvo interior and matched completely in color, nylon fiber structure, and dye composition, proving the body had direct contact with the vehicle interior. In the comprehensive report sent to the Middlesex prosecutor's office, Dr. Becker wrote, "The victim sustained fatal head trauma from a single blunt force impact, likely while seated in vehicle. Blood and soil evidence suggest post-mortem relocation approximately 0.4 miles west of Route 9. Ellen Fiske received a copy of the report, placing it beside excavation scene photos and area maps. Every piece now fit. Fabian was attacked while seated in his car, the perpetrator striking from behind, causing instant death. Blood spattered the seat and handkerchief. The injury caused his head to hit the window. The body was then dragged from the car and moved to Hammond Pond Woods, temporarily buried under the abandoned pump station foundation. Fiske read each line, then flipped back to Baker's interrogation transcript, He fell into the seat, head hit the steering wheel. The confession matched the forensics in every detail, except Baker called it a scuffle. Now, with evidence from bones, fibers, soil, and bloodstains, there was no doubt it was a deliberate attack. She signed the summary report, homicide confirmed. Blunt force trauma, evidence of body relocation. In the appendix, Becker's team added carbon-14 bone dating results, confirming time of death matched early February 1988, with a narrow 3-month margin of error. Along with the report, they sent CT scan images of the skull, illustrating the fracture line and indentation depth. The black and white image clearly showed the oval depression, irrefutable physical proof. Fiske sat in the cold case unit office in Worcester, placing the report next to the yellowed original 88-142 file. She reopened a photo of young Fabian with his wife in Cambridge, then looked at the Longines watch seized from Baker's home. The two images seemed connected by a trail of dried blood spanning 3 decades. In the comprehensive report sent to the state prosecutor, she wrote, "Forensic reconstruction confirms single impact causing instant death." Correlated physical and environmental evidence establish post-crime concealment. The missing person case of Fabian Morelli is now conclusively determined as homicide. At the bottom, she signed, stamped it red, and closed the documents. Outside the window, cold October morning fog settled, light rain falling on the glass, reflecting the white light of the forensics room. After 27 years, the disappearance had fully transformed from a clueless missing persons file to a fully evidenced murder case, where every detail of the past, from bloodstains, soil particles, to gray wool fibers, precisely recounted what humans had tried to bury in the Massachusetts winter of 1988. After the forensic examination results confirmed the cause of death, and the physical evidence completely matched Robert Baker's statement, the Middlesex County District Attorney's Office officially initiated the process of preparing an indictment against the 2 main suspects in the Fabian Morelli case. On October 6, 2015, lead prosecutor Marjorie Levitt chaired a meeting in Cambridge, attended by representatives from the cold case unit, the Lowell forensics team, and forensic financial experts. On the table were 3 thick files, each nearly 10 centimeters thick: the DNA file, the financial file, and the physical evidence file. Each was numbered State versus Baker and Morelli, case hash 88-142R. The meeting lasted over 8 hours, with every item reviewed and reorganized into a complete indictment structure. Levitt opened, "We have the DNA, we have the motive, and now we have the body. Time is no longer an issue." She assigned the legal team to draft 3 main charges: first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and insurance fraud, along with concealment and illegal disposal of a human body. Secondary charges included obstruction of justice and making false statements to law enforcement. The core evidence focused on the chain linking DNA, finances, and concealment behavior. Ellen Fiske presented the entire investigation timeline, projecting images of physical evidence on a large screen. The blood-stained handkerchief, E4788, the Longines watch engraved, Monica's handwritten letter to Baker from 1989, and the financial report of a $20,000 wire transfer. Alongside was a copy of the $400,000 life insurance policy, naming Monica Morelli as the beneficiary. The prosecution office agreed that this chain of documents proved the intimate relationship and financial benefit between the 2 defendants before and after the victim's disappearance. The forensics team presented a summary: blood samples matching the victim and Baker, fingerprints matching both on the letter, Fabian's DNA on the watch, seized from Baker's home, and conclusions about blunt force cranial trauma. Fiske added that soil samples from the victim's clothing perfectly matched the area where the car was found, proving the body had been moved. Dr. Becker's final report was selected as the centerpiece for opening the indictment. Scientific evidence confirms the victim died from violent action with deliberate burial. The second part of the file was handled by the financial team. Monica Morelli's bank account, the $20,000 transfer to Baker in December 1988. Phone calls between them at the same time, and the insurance claim filed immediately after Fabian's disappearance. This evidence was listed under motive and pre-planning. Levitt requested the analysis team to create a money flow diagram showing the financial relationship persisting for years after Baker left the state. A residency travel map from Massachusetts to California was added to the concealment timeline, proving they jointly resettled in Woodland Hills, Los Angeles, evidence of systematic collaboration. Fiske also presented 2015 surveillance records, images of envelope exchanges, secret communications, and hold for pickup packages. All electronic data and images were backed up to a separate hard drive, labeled Exhibit E, Surveillance Evidence. The meeting ended at 7:30 p.m. with the official decision. The Middlesex County District Attorney's Office will prosecute Robert L. Baker and Monica Morelli on 5 counts under Massachusetts General Laws, Sections 265 and 272. The summary document, signed by Levitt that same night, was sent to the Massachusetts Superior Court to request a preliminary hearing date. Before leaving the room, she turned to Fiske. "We'll have to unearth everything they tried to bury," Fiske replied. "It's all here, it just took time to see it." Over the next 3 days, the legal technical team worked non-stop to organize every piece of evidence, photograph, number, and catalog it. On the long table in the district attorney's office, sealed evidence bags were arranged in order: E4788, E4715A, E4715B, E4715B, E4715CH. Each bag was labeled in red, primary exhibits. Under supporting exhibits were bank statements, insurance contracts, residency records, and Los Angeles surveillance images. The 146-page indictment was completed on October 10, 2015. The first line was in bold: Commonwealth of Massachusetts versus Robert L. Baker and Monica Morelli, indictment under case hash 88142. R. On the final page, the conclusion stated, based on physical, forensic, financial evidence, and witness testimony, the Middlesex County District Attorney's Office determines that the criminal acts were deliberate, planned, for financial gain and concealment of murder. Levitt signed, embossed the seal, and forwarded the file to the court clerk for processing. That evening, Ellen Fiske left the office late. She stood before the case timeline board, where the handwritten Fabian Morelli, 1988, was now extended to 2015. Indictment. The late afternoon golden light shone on the board, reflecting bold red ink lines. 30 years of investigation, hundreds of pages of documents, countless pieces of evidence had finally converged into an indictment. A complete answer for a name Massachusetts once thought it would never hear again. The preliminary hearing for the case, Commonwealth of Massachusetts versus Robert L. Baker and Monica Morelli, officially opened on the morning of December 18, 2015, at the Middlesex County Superior Court in Cambridge. The courtroom was packed with reporters, witnesses, police representatives, and the victim's family. At the prosecution table, Marjorie Levitt led the state's legal team, with Detective Ellen Fiske beside her, invited as the lead investigating witness. At the defense table, Robert Baker wore a gray suit, his hair cropped short, his aged face calm. Monica Morelli sat one seat away, in a black sweater, hands clasped, not looking toward Baker. The hearing began with the reading of the indictment, the court clerk loudly reciting the 5 main charges, the most serious being first-degree murder. When asked how they pleaded, Baker said softly, "I accept my part," while Monica responded clearly, "Not guilty." Prosecutor Levitt opened with a brief statement. "This is a case of time, where the truth was buried for nearly 30 years, and now uncovered by science, persistence, and justice." She requested the main chain of evidence be projected on a large screen, photos of the Longines watch engraved FM, with the DNA report confirming the victim's blood, photos of Monica's 1989 handwritten letter to Baker, a map of the car's location and body exhumation site, and an excerpt of Baker's recorded statement in Cambridge. In the video, his voice spoke slowly. "I didn't mean to kill him, but I hit him, and Monica knew." That statement silenced the courtroom for a few seconds. Levitt turned to the jury. His own words confirmed the connection. And the letters, the money, the insurance contract, all show they shared a plan. She called Ellen Fiske to the stand. Fiske detailed the investigation process, from the DNA discovery and evidence seizure to the body exhumation. She pointed out forensic evidence linking 3 elements: Baker's blood, Fabian's body, and soil matching, Route 9. The defense tried to counter, claiming the DNA could have transferred during assistance to the victim, but Levitt immediately reread the forensic report. Baker's blood was on the edge of the handkerchief, impossible from mere light contact. Next, the prosecution presented Monica's letter, Exhibit E4715B. The letter was projected on the screen, its slanted handwriting clear. "Rob, I can't write more from Newton. Everything's too dangerous." As the clerk read it aloud, Monica bowed her head. Her defense attorney objected, arguing the letter proves no crime, only a personal relationship, but the judge allowed it due to its relevance to intent to conceal. After the physical evidence, the hearing moved to Baker's direct testimony. He took the stand, hands trembling but voice steady. "I take responsibility for Fabian's death. I hit him, but I wasn't alone." The prosecutor asked, "Can you clarify Monica Morelli's role?" Baker lowered his head. "She didn't tell me to do it, but she knew. She was afraid our affair would be exposed, afraid of losing everything. She told me to handle it. I did, and she said to leave Massachusetts." The courtroom buzzed, and the judge called for order. Monica's attorney objected, claiming Baker was saving himself by blaming her. When Monica's turn came, she stood, looked directly at the jury, and said firmly, "I never said anything like that. I didn't know what he planned to do. I wasn't involved." The prosecutor asked, "Then why did you send letters to Baker in 1989? Monica replied, "That was my mistake. I was scared, but I didn't commit a crime." Levitt approached with the final question, "If you weren't involved, why were Fabian's DNA, Fabian's watch, and your letters found in Baker's house?" Monica fell silent, lips pressed tight, offering no answer. During the recess, the press ran headlines: "Morelli trial, DNA, watch, and love letters presented." Over the following days, more than 10 witnesses were called, including forensic technicians, DNA experts, bank employees, and Boston Athletic Club managers. They reconstructed the 1988 timeline, the final phone call, the abandoned car, bloodstains, money transfers, and the secret affair. On the 8th day of the trial, the prosecution read a summary. Robert L. Baker admitted to the assault. Fabian's DNA was found in his home. Baker's DNA was on 1988 evidence. Monica Morelli was the sole financial beneficiary of her husband's death. When the judge allowed Baker a final statement, he said only, "I've lived 30 years with guilt, but not a day without thinking of her." His eyes turned to Monica, but she didn't look back. The courtroom air grew heavy, with only the sound of the clerk's pen tapping. Ellen Fiske sat behind the prosecution table, her hand on the old case file, watching the wall clock strike 11:47. Nearly matching the hour Fabian disappeared in 1988. Everything seemed to fall into place, in the room where time, evidence and guilt finally met after nearly 30 years of waiting. On December 29, 2015, after nearly 3 weeks of continuous trial and 2 days of deliberation, the Middlesex County Superior Court issued its official verdict in the case Commonwealth of Massachusetts v. Robert L. Baker and Monica Morelli. The Cambridge courtroom was packed that morning, with the front rows reserved for Fabian Morelli's relatives, their faces aged after nearly 3 decades of waiting. On the judge's bench, Eleanor Dyer read the verdict, lasting over 40 minutes, each word clear in the absolute silence. She began, after reviewing all physical evidence, witness testimony, DNA results, and financial records, the court concludes that the assault on Fabian Morelli on February 4, 1988, was intentional, carried out with collusion and deliberate concealment. The room held its breath as she continued, Defendant Robert L. Baker is found guilty of first-degree murder, concealment of a body, and obstruction of justice. Baker sat motionless, hands clasped, eyes on the floor. The judge's voice remained steady. The court sentences Robert L. Baker to life imprisonment without parole. A few gasps echoed from the gallery. Baker nodded slightly, showing no reaction, his clouded eyes flickering briefly as the sentence concluded. Dyer turned to Monica. For defendant Monica Morelli, based on the evidence of handwritten letters, financial records, and accomplice testimony, the court finds that she had prior knowledge of the assault on Fabian Morelli, assisted in concealment, and deliberately defrauded a life insurance policy for financial gain. Monica stood as requested by the clerk, her hands trembling slightly. The judge read slowly. The court finds Monica Morelli guilty of first-degree murder as an accomplice, insurance fraud, and false statements to investigators. Sentence: life imprisonment without parole, for the first count. Remaining counts to run concurrently. Monica closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and said softly, "I didn't do it." Her voice was quiet but clear, echoing in the heavy courtroom air. Her defense attorney placed a hand on her shoulder, but Monica didn't turn. The judge concluded the sentencing with a brief statement, "After 27 years, Massachusetts justice has its answer. This closes case file 88-142. The gavel struck 3 times. The sound was dry and final. Prosecutor Marjorie Levitt stood, offering no statement, only a slight nod. Ellen Fiske, seated in the back row, looked around the dark wood-paneled room, where winter light streamed through narrow windows, falling on the faces of the 2 defendants. The man with his head bowed in silence, and the woman standing motionless, neither crying nor expressive. She opened her notebook and wrote the final line, December 29, 2015, verdict delivered. Justice delayed, not denied. After the trial, statewide media coverage was extensive. 1988, disappearance ruled homicide. 2 suspects receive life sentences. WBZ-TV's Evening News replayed footage of the Longinese watch engraved, FM. The evidence that sparked the reinvestigation. In a brief post-trial press conference, Levitt said, "Justice has no expiration date. When science and humanity go the distance, the truth always emerges." At Middlesex County Jail, Baker was immediately transferred to the high-security Walpole State Prison, while Monica was taken to the Framingham facility for female inmates. Before leaving the courthouse, she turned to look at the gallery one last time, her gaze passing over the empty back rows, where Ellen Fiske stood still. The 2 women locked eyes for a few brief seconds, wordless. The steel door closed behind her, its echo resounding down the hallway. Outside, snow began to fall lightly on the courthouse grounds, the season's first flakes blanketing the granite steps. After nearly 30 years, case file hash 88-142 was closed, with 2 life sentences, completing the circle of a disappearance once buried under Massachusetts snow. Now one of the landmark rulings showcasing the relentless efforts of the Cold Case Unit, where old cases are never forgotten. In January 2016, just weeks after the verdict, Detective Ellen Fiske officially completed the comprehensive case report for the Fabian Morelli investigation, a 987-page document numbered CCU 88-142 Ars Final. The report was sent to the Middlesex County District Attorney's Office, the Massachusetts Department of Justice, and the Cold Case Unit Center in Worcester. In the introduction, Fiske wrote, "The Morelli case demonstrates the value of long-term evidence preservation, forensic science application, and systematic reinvestigation." She summarized the 3-decade journey, the 1988 disappearance, initial failed investigation, Framingham storage, 2003 review, 2015 STR DNA analysis, arrest and prosecution. Each phase was detailed, highlighting errors and strengths. In the evaluation section, Fiske wrote, "The reason the Morelli file stalled initially was not investigative incompetence, but technical limitations, and inconsistent storage protocols. Evidence E4788 was fortunately preserved correctly, becoming the decisive factor when DNA technology was applied. She meticulously detailed forensic processes from separating O+ and B blood samples, identifying DNA matching Robert Baker, to soil, fiber, and blunt force cranial trauma analysis. Each process included images, charts, STR electrophoresis results, and examination method descriptions. The 412-page forensic review section was praised as a model for state forensic training courses. Additionally, Fiske devoted a chapter to evidence management and storage. She noted that manual storage, handwritten logs, and lack of digital encoding in the 1980 ET90 period risked case loss, but Morelli was a rare case where files, evidence, and microfilm were preserved intact. Fiske commented, "The Framingham storage system needs full digitization. Digitization not only enables rapid access, but ensures data integrity over decades." In the cold case unit evaluation, she listed 17 improvement recommendations, establishing a statewide evidence database, annual review protocols, automatic CODIS DNA updates, and closer coordination with the Lowell Forensics Institute. Another chapter, titled Human Factors, acknowledged key individuals: Sergeant Harold Kinsley, who opened the 1988 file; Dr. Arlen Becker, who analyzed blood and DNA; Prosecutor Marjorie Levitt, who relaunched the case; and LAPD technicians involved in surveillance. She wrote, "Without them, this case would still lie in darkness." At the end of this section, Fiske assessed the cold case model across 3 criteria: evidence preservation, scientific application, and federal connectivity. She proposed a forensic continuity program, an automated system linking DNA, fingerprints, and financial data in a shared database, enabling cold cases to reactivate automatically with new technology. In the 8-page conclusion, Fiske wrote with rare emotional directness, "File #88142 began with a missing person call and ended with 2 life sentences. The difference between 1988 and 2015 was not just time, but how we looked at the evidence. When technology evolves, the truth no longer stays silent." She signed as Ellen Fiske, lead detective, Massachusetts Cold Case Unit, embossed with the state seal, and stored the original in Worcester. 3 copies were sent to the Framingham archives, printed on acid-free paper, labeled in red archival, "Do Not Destroy." In the appendix, Fiske added a special item, recommendation #17, preserve legacy of case 88-142, as reference for cold case methodology. On the day of submission, she visited the Framingham archives for the first time since 2003. The old shelves remained, under dim yellow lights, with the familiar smell of aged paper. She requested locker B14, where the E4788 metal box was once stored. When the staff pulled open the heavy door, Fiske saw the old box now bore a new label: "Closed, evidence retained." She placed her hand on the cold metal, paused silently, then said, "We kept him long enough to bring him home." In the final note, clipped to page 987, she handwrote, "Recommendation: upgrade Massachusetts statewide evidence storage system." So no more Fabian Morellis are buried by time. As she left the archives, Framingham was shrouded in fog, street lights reflecting off melting snow. She walked slowly, carrying the only copy of the report, knowing that her work, and that of those persistent for nearly 30 years, was finally complete, setting a new standard for investigations born from the coldest case files. On February 4, 2016, exactly 27 years since Fabian Morelli's disappearance, the Middlesex County District Attorney's Office and Massachusetts Cold Case Unit held a case closure signing ceremony at the Worcester headquarters. On the conference table, the nearly 1,000-page comprehensive report sat beside the sealed metal box coded E4788, the first and pivotal piece of evidence in the entire investigation. The state clerk opened the record, reading aloud the final line, "Case #88142. Fabian Morelli, status cold case resolved. 27 years." Prosecutor Marjorie Levitt signed first, followed by Detective Ellen Fiske. The red close stamp was applied to the file cover, its dry thud ringing in the quiet room, like a bell marking the end of a nearly 3-decade journey. Per protocol, primary evidence E4788, including the blood-stained handkerchief, gray jacket, and supplementary DNA samples, was returned to the Massachusetts State Archives in Framingham, stored in a special compartment labeled Permanent Evidence Retention Homicide, Resolved. The box was resealed, placed between 2 layers of humidity-proof glass, with a metal plaque engraved, Fabian Morelli, 1988, 2015. Evidence that spoke after silence. The state's new electronic management system created a digitized file, directly linked to CODIS and the Cold Case Index, for training and forensic research. Fiske stood silently, watching the screen display, upload complete. She had followed this case since it was just a faded file in an old metal cabinet. Now, it became a model example for Massachusetts' entire criminal investigation system. In the archive record, the final line read simply, "No further action required." All supplementary evidence was sealed in parallel, from the Longines watch engraved FM to the 1989 handwritten letter, all stored in separate metal cabinets in the preservation vault alongside national cold case reference files. Fiske closed the box lid, placed her hand on the cold steel, the familiar feeling from 2003 returning, when she first opened it and saw the handwritten E4788. Now, the same box bore new sealing, symbolizing complete closure. That afternoon, Levitt issued an internal bulletin. Morelli file officially closed. All investigation, trial, and storage procedures completed per state standards. Cold case resolved, 27 years. The notice was sent to all local police departments as a landmark symbol of forensic technology's power and human persistence. As Ellen Fiske left the Worcester building, winter snow began falling again, lightly covering the stone steps. She paused, looking north, where Cambridge and Hammond Pond woods lay shrouded in distant white. In her official vehicle, the backup case file rested quietly on the back seat, labeled Case Hash 88142, closed. She lightly touched the cover, whispering as if to the departed, "You were found." At the Framingham Archives, box E4788 was placed in slot number 27, matching the years from the case's start to its closure. The metal door closed slowly. The security lock clicked into place, its mechanical echo lingering in the cold space. Marking the final moment, Fabian Morelli's name appeared in Massachusetts's investigative records. No longer a missing person, but a silent witness whose justice found its voice after 27 years buried under white snow. The story of the Fabian Morelli case is not just a crime record, it's a mirror reflecting how American society operates between justice, technology, and memory. Nearly 30 years, a seemingly hopeless disappearance was resolved through the perseverance of people who believed the truth never expires. What makes this case profoundly significant in today's American life is not just forensic progress, like STR-DNA technology, identifying blood on handkerchief E4788, or the watch engraved FM, but the cold case unit spirit, persistence against time, and human error. In a modern society where news comes and goes hourly, this story reminds us that justice is not an instant event, but a long process of faith and responsibility. The careful preservation of evidence for 27 years proves the importance of safeguarding data, a major message in today's digital age. When we live amid an ocean of easily forgotten information, it's also a cautionary tale about morality and the consequences of greed. Monica Morelli, for financial gain and fear of losing reputation, chose betrayal, only to be imprisoned by her own secrets. In today's America, where individual and material values often clash, this story reminds each person that no success or cover-up is worth trading for truth and dignity. The greatest lesson from the Morelli case is believe in the power of honesty, intelligence, and time, Because in a nation that values justice like America, no truth can remain buried forever, whether under snow or the silence of human shadows. If you believe that truth, no matter how long it's buried, will one day be found, please subscribe to the channel to join us in exploring other cold cases across America. Thank you for following the Fabian Morelli case. See you in the next video, where justice and memory awaken once again.